Chapter 763. Why is this old thing here? Do you want to capture me? Zhou Xuanji thought to himself. Normally, a range master would not attack the geniuses of other divine ranges. It would be beneath his status. However, the evil sky divine range was in a dangerous period and anything could happen. If Beast Sovereign didn't make a move, he would have to kneel here today. Although he was full of confidence, he also understood the gap between him and Namitiani. The several hundred people in the surroundings also noticed Namitiani's approach, but they did not recognize him. There were many powerhouses in the Kunlun Origin Court. Who could remember each and every one of them? Namitiani, as the sovereign bloodline master, rarely appeared in front of everyone. Even if they didn't recognize him, they could sense that Namitiani was very powerful. Zhou Xuanji, come with me, Namitiani said as he stared at Zhou Xuanji, not allowing him to escape. Zhou Xuanji smiled and asked, if I go, can I survive? When the onlookers heard this, there was an uproar. Who is this old man? Even Zhou Xuanji feared him. As long as you obey me, I won't kill you, Namitiani said calmly. Then, he changed the topic and continued. Don't think that Beast Sovereign will come to save you. He can't even take care of himself. Everyone is an ant in front of the general trend. Although the Evil Sky Divine range is a super divine range, its current ranking is already your limit. Do you understand? The Evil Sky Divine range has no future. Only by following our Tiani Divine range will there be hope. Not only did this old man want to seize the treasure, but he also wanted to seize the person. With a thought, the soul source orb between Zhou Xuanji's eyebrows appeared, and a trace of black chi of bad luck leaked out. Namu Tiani coldly snorted. Do you really think I'm afraid of the Holy Ghost? Zhou Xuanji's gaze became serious, and the surrounding void became dark, isolating the spectators. In the blink of an eye, only he and Zhou Xuanji were left in this dark void, and no one else could disturb them. I'm not afraid to tell you that I deliberately pretended to be afraid in order to elevate your Evil Sky Divine range. A super divine range wants to surpass a sovereign divine range. Aren't you afraid of falling to your death? Your Beast Sovereign is very courageous. He dares to accept any challenge. Now, he will reap what he has sown. Namu Tiani laughed disdainfully, his eyes filled with contempt. Obviously, his evaluation of Beast Sovereign was very low. Zhou Xuanji didn't refute this. Beast Sovereign was indeed a little impatient. Although he didn't know how strong a sovereign divine range was, wanting to go against the entire Kunlun Origin Court with just the Evil Sky Divine range's ranking was just seeking instant benefits. No matter what, Zhou Xuanji would never betray the Evil Sky Divine range, unless the Evil Sky Divine range didn't want him. Zhou Xuanji used the Sword Fusion Technique and Nine Soul Fusion Technique, raising his aura to the peak. The Proud Mortal Sword and Proud Mortal Ghost Sword appeared in his hands, and the Tri-Phoenix Cheeling Carriage behind him was stored in the Supreme Storage. He had already entered battle mode. The moment Namitian saw his expression, he understood what he meant. It's a pity for your talent. Namitiani shook his head and sighed. He raised his right hand, and 4 golden mountains appeared around Zhou Xuanji. In an instant, there was a loud bang. Zhou Xuanji was sandwiched by the 4 golden mountains and could not move. What kind of divine ability is this? Zhou Xuanji's heart skipped a beat. This attack came too quickly, and even though they were facing each other, he could not react in time. He struggled hard, but he couldn't push the 4 golden mountains away. At this moment, he was like a monkey under the 5 Elements mountain. He couldn't escape at all. Namitiani walked over and said expressionlessly, since you don't want to surrender, then die. Seeing that you are talented, I will give you a chance to be reincarnated. Zhou Xuanji gritted his teeth and directly threw out the Holy Ghost from the Soul Source Orb. Since I'm going to die anyway, I might as well fight. The invisible Holy Ghost flew out from his Soul Source Orb. It roared silently with a hideous look on its face. Although Nanmu Tiani couldn't see the Holy Ghost, he could feel its presence. Just in time, the corner of Nanmu Tiani's mouth rose. He raised his right hand and grabbed the Holy Ghost in his hand. Zhou Xuanji was stunned. He was a little stunned. The Holy Ghost was caught just like that. How high is this old thing's cultivation? No, I must find a way to escape, Zhou Xuanji thought. He saw that Namatiani was overjoyed. He no longer cared about dealing with him. After thinking about it, Zhou Xuanji desperately urged the power of the exterminating divine eyes to resist the 4 golden mountains. It was the first time he had encountered such a divine ability. It was as if he was sandwiched by 4 hard sponges. Every time he used his Tao energy, it would be absorbed. Namatiani noticed his movements and said with a smile, "Do you want to live? I can give you a chance to live." Zhou Xuanji furrowed his brow and asked, "What do you mean?" Namatiani stopped smiling and said calmly, "I have lived for countless years and killed too many range masters and geniuses. You can subdue the Holy Ghost, which shows that you are different from the others. If you can be reborn, I will help you become the sovereign in the future. Should you accept it or not? If you refuse, I can give you a quick death." Zhou Xuanji hesitated. Is there such a good thing? What does this old thing want? Namatiani continued, "Don't think it's unbelievable. The Tiani divine range has given birth to the sovereign and also supported the sovereign. I have no interest in the sovereign. Otherwise, I would have the highest chance of becoming the sovereign. The impasse I will send you to is called Anti-Kunlun. Everything has 2 sides. The Kunlun origin court is the same. In Anti-Kunlun, everything is the opposite of reality. Anyone who enters Anti-Kunlun will find it difficult to escape. There is only one way to escape, and that is to reach the peak of the origin court. Are you going or not?" Namatiani looked at Zhou Xuanji and asked solemnly. Zhou Xuanji asked, "How many people have you sent to Anti-Kunlun?" Namatiani replied, "There are at least 10,000 of them." "How many people escaped?" "1 person." "Who?" "The sovereign who disappeared." Zhou Xuanji raised his brow. He didn't expect Namutiani to have such a past with the sovereign. When you are strong enough, you will understand that there are no eternal enemies in the Kunlun origin court. Back then, the sovereign was like you. He was also my enemy, but he passed the test, so I helped him. After he became the sovereign, he promoted the Tiani divine range. Strength is the key to everything. Namutiani waved his left hand, and a 7-colored vortex appeared in front of Zhou Xuanji, blocking his sight. Zhou Xuanji fell into silence. He was still thinking about Namutiani's words. The 7-colored vortex approached him and soon engulfed him. The 4 golden mountains dissipated along with it, disappearing with the wind. Namutiani looked at his right hand. It seemed like there was nothing there, but in fact it was grabbing the Holy Ghost's neck, making it unable to move. The corner of his mouth curled up as he said with a smile, "I hope you can give me a miracle. The origin court needs a sovereign, but it's not easy to escape from Anti-Kunlun. Previously, I was more optimistic about a seedling, but he died inside." Immediately, he turned around and left. He was very happy to get the Holy Ghost. He was ready to go back and study it. This time, you'll definitely lose. Chapter 764. After Zhou Xuanji fell into the colorful vortex, he felt the world spinning around him. No matter how strong his cultivation was, he couldn't help but feel dizzy after spinning countless times. He felt that his internal organs were about to spill out. It was extremely uncomfortable. Bam! Zhou Xuanji fell to the ground. His bones were almost broken. He didn't prop himself up, but lay on the ground to rest. After a long time, only then did the extremely uncomfortable dizziness slowly disappear. He opened his eyes and realized that he was lying in a dusky world, surrounded by black gas. There was no spiritual chi here, only a kind of gas similar to the chi of misfortune. It was very evil. Even someone as strong as Zhou Xuanji couldn't help but feel murderous. He immediately suppressed this feeling. He didn't act immediately. Instead, he took out the Lesser Supreme Sword and summoned Little Sovereign. Soon, Little Sovereign appeared. Little Sovereign shouted, "Why are you calling me again? How long have I been asleep?" "Kid." He shut up before he could finish speaking. He looked around in shock. His eyes widened as he cursed. "Brat, how did you come to Anti-Kunlun?" His tone was full of horror. He wasn't scared for himself, but for Zhou Xuanji. This kid is dead. I just want to ask you about Anti-Kunlun, Zhou Xuanji calmly asked. His heart had been in a state of uneasiness ever since he came to Anti-Kunlun. But he didn't panic. Since I'm here, I'll just take things as they come. It's better than being killed by Namatiani. Everything in Anti-Kunlun is the opposite of the Kunlun Origin Court. Here, you will meet all the creatures of the Kunlun Origin Court, but their personalities are completely opposite. You will also meet the opposite of yourself. Once the creatures of the Kunlun Origin Court come here and expose their identity, they will be hunted down endlessly. The most terrifying thing is that if you want to reach the peak of the Origin Court, do you know what you have to go through? Little Sovereign said in a horrified tone. In the end, he even deliberately scared Zhou Xuanji. Zhou Xuanji impatiently asked, "Can you stop keeping me in suspense?" Little Sovereign sighed and explained, "The peak of the Origin Court is where the Sovereign lives. This is why those who can break out can become the Sovereign. It's because they have already experienced the power of the Sovereign and obtained the Sovereign's consent." Zhou Xuanji furrowed his brow. He finally understood how difficult this task was. How was this a fortuitous encounter? It was simply sending him to his death. In the future, Namatiani could say that he had given him a chance to live. If Zhou Xuanji really made it out and became the Sovereign, he would owe him a favor. It had to be said that this move was flawless. It was no wonder that the Qiani divine range was able to establish itself for such a long time. Zhou Xuanji deeply breathed in and took out the Holy Light Redemption sword to save himself. Little Sovereign glanced around and said in amazement, "Your luck is pretty good. This is a continent. If you fell into a Sovereign divine range, it would be fun." A continent meant a mortal world. "Can you help me?" Zhou Xuanji asked. Little Sovereign shook his head and said, "Help? How could he help? At most, I can point out the scenery along the way." Zhou Xuanji nodded and did not speak again. He didn't directly take back the Lesser Supreme Sword. Instead, he let Little Supreme Sword guard the surroundings. 6 hours later, Zhou Xuanji got up and took out the Tri-Phoenix Qilin carriage and sat inside. Since the Anti-Kunlun was essentially the same as the Kunlun Origin Court, he might be able to attract the attention of many creatures if he traveled on this treasure, saving him some trouble. After all, no ordinary person could have such a gorgeous and powerful mount artifact. Inside the carriage, Little Sovereign exclaimed in admiration, "Brat, you are very smart." Back then, I also relied on this method to stay safe for a long time. But in the end, it still depends on strength. Back then, Zhou Xuanji looked at him in surprise. It turned out that this guy had also broken through the Anti-Kunlun. Little Sovereign, seeing the look in his eyes, immediately smiled proudly. "Do you know, the most dangerous enemy in the Anti-Kunlun is the person you care about? Their temperament is the opposite of what you remember. They will become your enemy. You have to think about how you will kill them," Little Sovereign reminded. He couldn't help but sigh at the mention of this. Back then, he had been troubled by this. He still had lingering fears. Zhou Xuanji nodded. He had also thought of this. But in his opinion, his family in the Anti-Kunlun wasn't his family. His family was unique. Everything in the Anti-Kunlun had nothing to do with him. The Tri-Phoenix Qilin carriage flew into the sky, piercing through the space-time barrier and heading toward the Anti-Kunlun Origin Court. Along the way, Zhou Xuanji saw many creatures with his divine will. These creatures didn't look any different from the creatures in the Anti-Kunlun Origin Court, but they were dark as if they were in the dark. The Tri-Phoenix Qilin carriage didn't stop. All the creatures it encountered along the way looked at it, but no one dared to approach it. Zhou Xuanji noticed that these creatures didn't like to communicate. There were many grudges between them. This is the Anti-Kunlun. The main theme of the Kunlun Origin Court is peace and order. But in the Anti-Kunlun, it's slaughter and chaos. Naturally, they don't dare to talk casually, Little Sovereign replied, making Zhou Xuanji fall into deep thought. He was wondering if the existence of the Anti-Kunlun was real or illusory. If it really exists, why are there two origin courts with the same group of creatures? After some time, The Tri-Phoenix Chelan carriage finally drove into the Black Sea on the edge of the origin court when a voice came. "Stop, who are you? Tell me your name." The voice was very soft and had a sense of cautiousness. Zhou Xuanji scanned it with his divine will and found that it was a void boundary god. He was trembling in front of Zhou Xuanji, looking very timid. Zhou Xuanji had a weird look on his face. He suddenly wanted to laugh. He didn't bother to pay attention to this guy. He just drove the Tri-Phoenix Chelan carriage forward quickly. Void boundary god couldn't stop him. He could only evade. Looking at the Tri-Phoenix Chelan carriage moving away, Void boundary god sighed and murmured, "They all bully me, humiliate me. If you continue to force me, I won't do it." Void boundary god felt extremely wronged. Ever since he became the void boundary god, he had lost all his face. This void boundary was obviously empty, but he had to stay here. It was simply torturing him. On the other side, after entering the anti-Kunlun origin court, Zhou Xuanji didn't go looking for the evil sky divine range. Instead, he flew upward. The Tri-Phoenix Chelan carriage wasn't too fast because Zhou Xuanji was still thinking about countermeasures. He needed to think about how to reach the peak of the origin court. He couldn't help but ask Little Sovereign, "Is there no special opportunity in the anti-Kunlun? There should be magical opportunities in such a dangerous place that could make people reborn." "I thought so too when I first came in," Little Sovereign sighed. Zhou Xuanji furrowed his brow upon hearing this. How much time would it take for him to break out of the anti-Kunlun just by relying on his own cultivation and world internalization? If there was no opportunity in the anti-Kunlun, what was the point? But then I found out that there was. Little Sovereign suddenly changed the topic and chuckled. Zhou Xuanji wanted to beat him up. Why does this guy like to keep me in suspense? Chapter 765. Will you die if you say it directly? Zhou Xuanji asked in a bad mood. This guy still likes to keep me in suspense at a time like this. Little Sovereign chuckled and explained, "The rules that maintain the existence of anti-Kunlun are called inverse chaos chi. As long as you devour it, you can continue to grow stronger. You can even master the inverse chaos divine ability. This divine ability can reverse all divine abilities. Strong is weak, hard is soft, broad is narrow. Mastering the inverse chaos divine ability can help you walk more steadily on the Sovereign's path. It can even be said that you can only escape if you master the inverse chaos divine ability." Zhou Xuanji narrowed his eyes. He immediately became interested in the inverse chaos chi. If the inverse chaos divine ability is really as powerful as Little Sovereign said, I really have to learn it. He waited for Little Sovereign to continue. Little Sovereign said leisurely, "The inverse chaos chi is equivalent to the luck of anti-Kunlun. You must kill the enemy to accumulate the inverse chaos chi." Zhou Xuanji's expression changed. Is he forcing me to become an enemy of anti-Kunlun? Little Sovereign said with a playful smile, "Yes, this is almost a dead end. Of course, there is another option, and that is to integrate into anti-Kunlun. However, your aura and anti-Kunlun's Tao energy repel each other. If you don't absorb the inverse chaos chi, you'll be gradually nibbled away." Zhou Xuanji nodded. He immediately made up his mind. "I can't stay here forever. I have to go back. In that case, I have to kill my way back." This might be unfair to the people of anti-Kunlun, but he had no choice. Even if he didn't kill the creatures of anti-Kunlun would still kill him. After thinking about it, Zhou Xuanji swept out his divine will and began hunting. Next, he killed all the creatures he encountered along the way. Their bodies and souls were destroyed. His movements were very fast. He tried to make the creatures of anti-Kunlun suffer as little pain as possible. Gradually, he felt a strange power flowing in his body. Inverse chaos chi. This power was very strange. He couldn't control it, but it was very warm. It made him feel refreshed. In order to avoid being chased by anti-Kunlun, he didn't move too fast. He specifically looked for the direction with the least number of creatures to prevent the news from leaking. In the blink of an eye, several days passed. Zhou Xuanji had accumulated a lot of inverse chaos qi in his body. But according to Little Sovereign, he was still far from mastering the inverse chaos divine ability. When his inverse chaos qi reached a certain level, he would be able to comprehend the inverse chaos divine ability. After comprehending it, he would have to cultivate it, and the process of cultivation would consume even more inverse chaos qi. Just tell me, how many do I have to kill to cultivate the inverse chaos divine art? Zhou Xuanji, listening to Little Sovereign's preaching, interrupted impatiently. Little Sovereign chuckled and said, "At least 100 Origin Fusion Divine Lords can comprehend it. If you want to completely learn it, you'll have to kill 1,000 Origin Fusion Divine Lords." Having heard this, Zhou Xuanji's expression changed drastically. He already knew that the Origin Fusion Divine Lord was a realm above the 9 vast heavens. He couldn't even take on one Origin Fusion Divine Lord, let alone 1,000 Wei. He was an Origin Fusion Divine Lord, which was equivalent to killing 1,000 Wei Yis. Just thinking about it gave him a headache. How were they supposed to kill him? It was not a matter of time at all. He had to continue to become stronger in order to achieve that. It's not that easy. Let's take it slow. Little Sovereign comforted him. He understood Zhou Xuanji's despair. Back then, he was even more desperate. But now, at least Zhou Xuanji had him to guide him. In the past, he was completely blind. If he hadn't killed countless creatures and suddenly comprehended the inverse chaos divine art, he wouldn't have known about its existence. Before that, he had spent thousands of years learning it. For thousands of years, he had wandered from place to place, hiding from place to place. He had suffered as much as he could. Zhou Xuanji nodded. He also understood that this matter couldn't be rushed. With the ability of the evil sky divine range, it wouldn't be destroyed in a short time. So, he didn't have to worry about the evil sky divine range. At this moment, he had to find a way to become stronger. In the process of killing the enemy, he also used world internalization to enhance his cultivation. Time continued to pass. After half a year, Zhou Xuanji's killing of anti-Kunlun creatures was still leaked out. After all, there were many experts in the anti-Kunlun. They could see it from a distance. Plus, so many anti-Kunlun creatures had died in his hands. How could he not be noticed? Stop! A loud roar came. Zhou Xuanji, who was in the Tri-Phoenix Qilin carriage, swept out with his divine will. His expression suddenly turned weird. It turned out to be Ying Zhuge. Ying Zhuge's face was hideous and murderous. His black robe fluttered nonstop as if his whole body was burning with flames. His opposite looks like this? Zhou Xuanji wanted to laugh. In his impression, Ying Zhuge was confident and calm. But this Ying Zhuge looked so violent. He didn't panic. He wasn't afraid of Ying Zhuge now. He directly took out the proud mortal sword and used suppressing the universe at the same time. Ying Zhuge couldn't move in an instant. The proud mortal sword flew out of the Tri-Phoenix Qilin carriage and pierced through Ying Zhuge. The mortal world was severed. His soul was shattered. Ying Zhuge's Tao energy was sucked into Zhou Xuanji's body. After killing Ying Zhuge, Zhou Xuanji drove the Tri-Phoenix Qilin carriage and quickly left. He didn't know which divine range this Ying Zhuge represented, but he understood that he couldn't afford to offend either side. The anti-Kunlun seemed desolate, but the divine ranges still existed. It was just that they weren't as harmonious as the Kunlun Origin Court. All the divine ranges were at odds with each other, fighting openly and secretly. Zhou Xuanji sat in the carriage, deep in thought. Can I take advantage of the hatred between the divine ranges? However, he couldn't go there with his real body. He immediately took out his doppelganger. Panjun was the most powerful chaos demon god in the universe. All these years, Zhou Xuanji did not neglect his clones. Panjun's power was already close to the Tao ancestor realm. He poured the inverse chaos qi in his body into Panjun's body, wanting to turn Panjun into a living being of anti-Kunlun. This move of yours is very clever. I understand what you're trying to do. Little Sovereign's eyes lit up as he exclaimed in admiration. Back then, if he had discovered the effect of the inverse chaos qi earlier and used Zhou Xuanji's method, he might not have been in such a difficult situation. Just thinking about it made his heart ache. Zhou Xuanji said calmly, "Help me control the direction of the Tri-Phoenix Qilin carriage and escape to a place where no one can find us." He wasn't afraid of Little Supreme betraying him. The Sword Spirit had said that the Sword Souls in the Supreme Legendary Sword System were absolutely loyal to him. It was impossible for them to plot against him. It was an undetectable form of control. "All right, I'll bring you to the secret cave abode that I used to live in." Little Sovereign smiled proudly. Only after coming to the Anti-Kunlun did this kid realize how powerful his real body was. As long as he helped Zhou Xuanji break out of the Anti-Kunlun, Zhou Xuanji would have great hopes of becoming the sovereign. Once Zhou Xuanji became the sovereign, he would have a chance to be resurrected. As for betraying Zhou Xuanji and finding other hosts, he didn't have such a thought at all. Even he himself couldn't explain it. Maybe this kid's experience was similar to his. Zhou Xuanji didn't answer. He began to focus on modifying Pan Zhen. Over the next period of time, experts kept coming to kill him. It seemed that they belonged to the same divine range. Fortunately, he had the exterminating divine eyes. No matter how many came, he killed them all. Chapter 766. Half a month later, under Little Sovereign's control, the Tri-Phoenix Qilin carriage arrived at the edge of the Anti-Kunlun. There were many continents of different sizes floating in the air like stars surrounding the moon. The nearby emptiness realm was dead silent. There was no sign of life. It was gloomy. The Tri-Phoenix Qilin carriage flew for about an hour before stopping on a barren continent. It could even be said that this was a giant meteorite. They flew into a hole in the ground and disappeared into the darkness. Pan Zhen's transformation was still continuing. He had already succeeded more than halfway. After all, he didn't have a soul and was only an avatar. His physical body was even more so the primal chaos body from the beginning of the universe, so it was very easy to transform. After the time it took for half an incense stick to burn, the Tri-Phoenix Qilin carriage passed through a barrier and came to a bright world. The sky was blue and the clouds were white. The ground was covered with green mountains and clear waters. There were many birds flying past. It was like a fairyland. Zhou Xuanji scanned the entire world with his divine sense and was shocked. The spiritual qi and Tao energy here were very abundant, and there was even a lot of inverse chaos qi mixed in. Amazing, right? Back then, after I learned the inverse chaos divine art, I didn't leave the Anti-Kunlun directly. Instead, I came back to reinforce this world. I thought that one day I would have to return to the Anti-Kunlun. After all, after recultivating, I would also have to recultivate the inverse chaos divine art. I would need the inverse chaos qi. Little Sovereign smiled proudly. He was proud of his far-sighted vision. Zhou Xuanji didn't argue this time. He also felt that Little Sovereign was far-sighted. After the Tri-Phoenix Qilin carriage landed, Zhou Xuanji walked out of the carriage with Pan Zhen and the Lesser Supreme Sword. Walking on the soft grass, the spiritual energy here made him feel refreshed. Ever since he arrived at the Anti-Kunlun, he had been feeling very uncomfortable. He only felt better when he absorbed the inverse chaos qi. "Then I'll take root here," Zhou Xuanji said with a smile. Then, he stabbed the Lesser Supreme Sword into the soil. He then sat opposite to Pan Zhen and focused on modifying Pan Zhen. 6 days later, Pan Zhen had completely turned into a creature of Anti-Kunlun. Most of the inverse chaos qi that Zhou Xuanji had absorbed had been consumed, but he didn't feel bad about it. Only in this way could he safely obtain more inverse chaos qi. Zhou Xuanji immediately sent Pan Zhen toward Anti-Kunlun. Pan Zhen's massacre might be a common thing for the Anti-Kunlun, but if Zhou Xuanji personally acted and was discovered, he would become the public enemy of the Anti-Kunlun, and they would unite against him. "Aren't you being too relaxed?" Little Sovereign sighed with emotion. He was speechless when he saw Zhou Xuanji cultivating by himself. This was the first time he saw someone casually barge into Anti-Kunlun. He could not help but feel envious. Back then, if he had had Zhou Xuanji's serendipity, he would not have had to suffer so much. Zhou Xuanji closed his eyes and snorted, "Don't be envious. Explain the Tao to me." Little Sovereign curled his lips. Since when did he have to be forced by the listener to preach the Tao? How hypocritical the world was. He cursed in his heart and then preached honestly. Zhou Xuanji quickly entered an absolutely calm Tao realm. The surrounding Tao energy surged madly into his body. Numerous phantom swords appeared around him, each using their own sword techniques. The scene was very majestic. On the other side, after Pan Zheng left the continent, he headed straight for Anti-Kunlun. He did not have an independent consciousness, but Zhou Xuanji had given him an order to kill any living creature he saw. Zhou Xuanji had also ordered Pan Zheng to target all living beings below the Tao ancestor realm. Of course, he didn't kill children or women. However, it was too difficult to meet children in Anti-Kunlun. Which one of them wasn't an old monster that had lived for millions of years? Time passed slowly. In the blink of an eye, Zhou Xuanji welcomed his 1000th birthday. Analyzed that the sword owner has reached 1,000 years old. Gotcha started. Ding. Congratulations, the sword owner has obtained All-Life Fusion Reverse Divine Sword. Mysterious Tao Desolate 7 Aperture Sword. Grand Enlightenment Divine Slash. Zhou Xuanji heard the sword spirit's voice and opened his eyes. Unknowingly, he was already 1,000 years old. Time really didn't wait for anyone. Up until today, the number of divine swords he had was close to 4,000. All the divine swords could use the sword fusion technique to help him. Information about the 2 swords appeared before his eyes. Sword name, reverse sword level, myriad fusion description. This is a divine sword that can reverse everything. Its origin is mysterious. To use this sword, one must reach the origin fusion divine Lord 3rd enlightened realm. Sword name, Heavenly Wilderness 7 Aperture Sword Grade. Profound Path description. The Heavenly Tao has 7 orifices, which are the centers of thousands of rules. This sword has countless changes and mysteries. You need to be at the late Tao-treading Saint realm to use this sword. Zhou Xuanji cried out in surprise. Could the reverse sword be related to the inverse, chaos chi? But why did it have to be such a coincidence? Is it because of the inverse chaos chi in my body? Zhou Xuanji fell into deep thought. He noticed the words Origin Fusion Divine, Lord 3rd Enlightened Realm. He asked, Origin Fusion Divine Lord is divided into Enlightened Realm? A voice came from the Lesser Supreme sword next to him. Yes. Origin Fusion Divine Lord is divided into 9 enlightened realms. Mind enlightened, body enlightened, and soul enlightened. Each enlightened realm has an insurmountable gap. Zhou Xuanji became even more interested after hearing this. He immediately asked, how does one cultivate Origin Fusion Divine Lord? The path of cultivation wasn't about breaking through endlessly by practicing in cultivation technique. Every breakthrough in the realm required a trick. Wait until you reach the 9 vast heavens. You are still far from it, Little Sovereign said in a bad mood. Zhou Xuanji could only stop asking. Next, Zhou Xuanji began to learn the Great Awareness Divine Slash. The Great Awareness Divine Slash was a slash divine ability that could be used in conjunction with the Exterminating Divine Eyes. Wherever one looked, the Great Awareness Divine Slash would attack. With a slash of a sword, if I can't do it, then who can? This divine ability wasn't bad. It was extremely destructive. Kunlun Origin Court, Pure Sword Heaven. Zhou Tanhua still looked like a teenager. He was sitting cross-legged by the river, cultivating. Xian Xianghua stood beside him, looking at him. After so many years, Zhou Tanhua's strength had already surpassed the Heavenly Saint and was comparable to the Overlord Saint. Such rapid progress made her very anxious as his mother. She was afraid that her son would surpass her at any time. Mother, how long are you going to watch me? Zhou Tanhua asked in a helpless tone. Ever since he started cultivating, Xian Xianghua had been looking at him very strangely. And look at Zhou Xiaoxian. Her mother dotes on her so much. Sometimes, Zhou Tanhua would feel jealous in his heart. But as his cultivation grew higher and higher, he got over it. It wasn't that his mother didn't love him, but she wasn't good at expressing it. She had placed all her feelings on his father, causing her to feel a little distant whenever she faced him. Xian Xianghua smiled and said, "Aren't I supervising your cultivation? When your father comes back, he will definitely be very surprised." Zhou Tanhua couldn't help but smile when he heard this. He also wanted to get his father's praise, but Zhou Xuanji hadn't been back for a long time. All creatures in the Evil Sky Divine range, listen up. The Evil Sky Divine range will be attacked by all the major divine ranges. All existences above the Tao Ancestor Realm. Gather and prepare for a large-scale war. Chapter 767. The Evil Sky Divine Range was besieged by various divine ranges. Zhou Tanhua opened his eyes in shock, and Xian Xianghua's complexion also changed dramatically. The reason why they could cultivate so peacefully was because of the Evil Sky Divine Range's protection. They did not want anything to happen to the Evil Sky Divine Range. With Zhou Xuanji's previous hatred, only the Evil Sky Divine Range dared to take him in. "I hope your father is not in danger," Xian Xianghua said softly, her eyes filled with worry. That brat had left for so long and still hadn't returned. Could something have happened to him? Even she was so worried, let alone Jiang Shui. They did not dare to look for Doya Old Man or Xiandaoya to have their fortunes read, so they could only worry blindly. Zhou Tanhua asked curiously, "Mother, the Evil Sky Divine Range is only ranked in the top 10. Why does Beast Sovereign dare to go against all the divine ranges? Does he have a trump card?" Xian Xianghua said perfunctorily, "How would I know? Only Di Zun himself knows. You should continue cultivating." With that, she quickly left. Zhou Tanhua smiled helplessly. He suddenly didn't want to cultivate anymore. He got up and went to find Chang Xian. He believed that Chang Xian could help him understand Beast Sovereign and the Evil Sky Divine Range. Anti-Kunlun, the underground world. Zhou Xuanji focused on cultivating. Pan Zhun flew back and passed the inverse chaos qi in his body to him. He noticed that Pan Zhun's right arm was broken. It was a miserable sight. Strange. Why hasn't it recovered? Could it be some kind of rule power? Most of the time, he was immersed in cultivation and did not pay attention to Pan Zhun. Only now did he know that Pan Zhun was injured. Little Sovereign smiled and said, "That's normal. With such strength, it would be a joke if they turned the anti-Kunlun upside down." No matter how strong Pan Zhun was, he did not even have the strength of a Tao ancestor. Only heaven knew how long it would take for him to collect the inverse chaos qi. Zhou Xuanji nodded. He did not plan to hide here forever. He just wanted to cultivate for a while. Once he reached 30 Flowers Tao ancestor, he would kill his way out. Only by reaching this realm could he truly use the Lesser Supreme Sword. Right now, he could only communicate with Little Sovereign, which didn't have much practical use in combat. He took out the Holy Light Redemption Sword and helped Pan Zhun heal. A day later, Pan Zhun's right arm began to heal on its own. Zhou Xuanji did not send him out again. Under the preaching of Little Sovereign, he continued to cultivate. He was already very close to 30 flowers. He had learned a lot of Sword Tao divine abilities, and his Tao was created by himself. Under the preaching of Little Sovereign, condensing a Tao flower wasn't difficult for him. Half a year later, Zhou Xuanji finally broke through to the 30 Flowers Tao Ancestor Realm. The first thing he did after the breakthrough was to hold the Lesser Supreme Sword. Soon, he felt the surging power of the Lesser Supreme Sword. "Kid, my sword is not simple. You have to use it carefully," Little Sovereign reminded with a proud look on his face. From now on, he could help Zhou Xuanji in battle. He could also display the power of a sovereign. Although it was far from his peak strength, it was enough. Zhou Xuanji stood up and smiled in high spirits. "Okay, it's time to go out and explore." He put the Tri-Phoenix Qilin carriage into the Supreme Storage and quickly escaped from the underground world with a Lesser Supreme Sword in hand. He flew toward the center of Anti-Kunlun. The power of the Lesser Supreme Sword was majestic, just like the exterminating divine eyes. It gave him an inexhaustible feeling. No one below the Essence Fusion Divine Lord should be able to defeat him. As for the Essence Fusion Divine Lord, he wasn't sure. He could freeze some Essence Fusion Divine Lords, such as Zhou Fa. Some couldn't, such as Wei Yi. Of course, Zhou Fa might not have reached the Essence Fusion Divine Lord realm at all. He just had a special divine ability that was deliberately mystifying. At least, that was what Zhou Xuanji thought. In his eyes, Zhou Fa was just that weak. Kid, you will also encounter the 5 ultimate divine eyes in Anti-Kunlun. You have to be careful. The 5 ultimate divine eyes reinforce and restrain each other. The exterminating divine eyes restrain the black desire divine eyes, and the destruction divine eyes restrain the exterminating divine eyes. Little Sovereign reminded. He was afraid that Zhou Xuanji would fail miserably. Zhou Xuanji nodded and said, "Don't worry, I know what to do." He had learned a lot about the 5 ultimate divine eyes from Barbaric Ultimate God. Exterminating divine eyes, black desire divine eyes, Kong Tong divine eyes, violent tremor divine eyes, and destruction divine eyes. The 5 divine eyes had different magical uses. All of them belonged to the pinnacle of the power of the eyes. Zhou Xuanji hadn't truly felt the power of the other divine eyes for the time being. Barbaric Ultimate God's eyes were long gone. Otherwise, he wouldn't have fallen into the great elimination of the Saint Realm. It was precisely because the violent tremor divine eyes weren't there that he suffered such humiliation. After walking for about an hour, he encountered a group of creatures flying towards the Anti-Kunlun Origin Court in a mighty manner. It seemed that they belonged to a certain divine range. Zhou Xuanji used Suppressing the Universe, freezing time and space as he raised the Lesser Supreme Sword and slashed. Ultimate Chaos Dao. Countless streaks of sword qi wreaked havoc, annihilating all the living beings in the area. Everything happened too quickly. This group of creatures didn't even have time to feel fear. Strands of invisible inverse chaos qi drilled into Zhou Xuanji's body, making him feel refreshed. Not only that, but there was also a huge amount of Dao energy. He used it together with world internalization. Only in this way could he grow stronger quickly. He continued moving forward and quickly disappeared into the depths of the starry sky. Some time later, a legend spread in the Anti-Kunlun universe. There was a swordsman who killed every creature he saw without mercy. Only Origin Fusion Divine Lords could defeat him, because Zhou Xuanji encountered an Origin Fusion Divine Lord and was defeated. Zhou Xuanji almost died in this battle. Fortunately, Little Sovereign burst out with powerful strength and teleported Zhou Xuanji away. After returning to the underground world to rest, Zhou Xuanji directly lay in bed for 3 months. After he recovered, he came out again. "Don't be reckless this time," Little Sovereign reminded, fearing that Zhou Xuanji would repeat the same mistake. Zhou Xuanji smiled confidently and said, "Don't worry. After that battle, I have become stronger again." When he fought with that Origin Fusion Divine Lord, he had absorbed a lot of his opponent's Dao energy, making his cultivation progress. Until now, his cultivation had reached 32 flowers Dao Ancestor Realm. That guy's cultivation must be above Origin Fusion Divine Lord Level 3. You didn't lose unjustly. It's already very strong that you didn't get killed in an instant, Little Sovereign said, nodding. This sentence was true. He had severely reprimanded Zhou Xuanji in order to teach him a lesson. Now that Zhou Xuanji had recovered, Little Sovereign wanted to give him confidence so that he wouldn't be traumatized. Fortunately, Zhou Xuanji was more determined than he had imagined. "This time, I will kill my way to the mortal divine range." The corner of Zhou Xuanji's mouth rose as he said with a mysterious smile. Little Sovereign's eyes widened when he heard this. He cursed, "Are you crazy?" The mortal divine range was a sovereign divine range. Its history was even longer than Little Sovereign's. Zhou Xuanji sped up and said softly, "Don't worry, I have a goal." Little Sovereign furrowed his brow. What is this kid thinking? He suddenly thought of something. His expression drastically changed. "Are you crazy?" he angrily rebuked. Panic was written all over his face. Zhou Xuanji's eyes were firm as he said, "Isn't the mortal god very useful for cultivation? I want to give it a try." Chapter 768. Mortal God. Ever since Zhou Xuanji heard about the origin of the mortal god, he had memorized this name. If it was before, he would definitely not go and capture the mortal god. But now that he was in the anti-Kunlun, he had to become stronger as soon as possible. Of course, he didn't refine the mortal gods like the other powerful figures. He wanted to find other ways to become stronger from the mortal gods. No, it's too risky. There are many ways to become stronger. I'll tell you one by one in the future. Little Sovereign anxiously said, "Why does this kid like to court death so much?" Zhou Xuanji chuckled and said, "Don't worry, I know what to do." He would not force his way into the mortal divine range. He just wanted to go to the mortal divine range and see if there was a chance to meet the mortal god. Although anti-Kunlun and Kunlun Origin Court were essentially the same, the distribution of creatures was different. They were developing in two completely different space-time. Little Sovereign was so angry that he wanted to curse. But he was just a sword soul. He couldn't stop Zhou Xuanji at all. He could only give up. After entering the anti-Kunlun Origin Court, Zhou Xuanji encountered many creatures. He did not attack immediately. After all, there were many divine ranges and origin cities around. Along the way, he came to the vicinity of the mortal divine range. From a distance, the mortal divine range was obviously larger than the other divine ranges around it, like a mountain protruding from the forest. There were many creatures in the mortal divine range, but not many went in and out, giving off a desolate feeling. Zhou Xuanji found an opportunity to catch a creature from the mortal divine range and quickly left. Arriving at the void realm of anti-Kunlun, he took out the truth sword and pierced it into his opponent's body. "Do you know the mortal god?" Zhou Xuanji asked with a smile. The other party was an ordinary-looking young man dressed in black. He had the cultivation of one vast heavens. The black-clothed youth looked terrified as he answered truthfully, "I know." His expression became even more frightened. Why did he answer? Impossible. Could it be this sword? His eyes were locked onto the truth sword, as if he was looking at the most terrifying existence in the world. "Tell me, is there a mortal god in the mortal divine range? Where are they?" Zhou Xuanji looked into his eyes and continued to ask. The black-clothed youth replied, "There are two of them. One is about to be given to the Tianyi divine range to show the long-lasting friendship between the two lineages. I'm not sure about the other one. It seems that she only recently found out about her identity. Previously, she was cultivating in an academy." Zhou Xuanji fell into deep thought. How should I get those two mortal gods? He asked, "Do these two mortal gods have any missions recently? Or will they come out?" The black-clothed youth instantly despaired. If he continued to speak, would he still be able to live? Unfortunately, he couldn't control his mouth. Yes, they're about to go on a trip. This will be their last trip. How strong are the people protecting them? Not sure. How many are there? I really don't know. The black-clothed youth was on the verge of tears. He had already said everything he could. If he continued asking, he knew that death would be waiting for him. "Do you know the exact time?" "I'm not sure. I only heard this from someone else." "All right, thank you," Zhou Xuanji said seriously. The true sword gave off a horrifying sword chi and instantly turned the young man in black into dust without any pain. Little Sovereign watched from the side and asked curiously, "Are you sure you want to capture the mortal god?" Zhou Xuanji nodded and began to think of a countermeasure. Should he capture one mortal god, or both at the same time? He wasn't afraid of offending the Tianyi divine range and the mortal divine range. However, he had to capture the two mortal gods without anyone knowing. Although he wasn't afraid, his strength was still there. He had to hide for now. "Then I will help you. Once we capture the mortal gods, I have a cultivation method that can help you speed up your cultivation. I also have a way to speed up the devouring of inverse chaos chi," Little Sovereign said in a low voice. Little Sovereign muttered with a helpless expression on his face. He couldn't dissuade this kid and could only obey. Zhou Xuanji's eyes lit up as he asked, "Why didn't you say so earlier?" Little Sovereign rolled his eyes and said, "You are so crazy Do you think I would dare to tell you? He suddenly looked forward to it. If he really captured the two mortal gods, this kid might really become stronger. Next, Zhou Xuanji rushed toward the mortal divine range. After that, he continued to capture lone mortal divine range creatures. Through the truth sword, he collected a lot of information. After piecing it together, he roughly knew the itinerary of the mortal gods. 50 years later, they would leave the anti-Kunlun and go to the origin of the mortal chi. It could be considered a farewell to the past. It was worth mentioning that the mortal gods were biological sisters. They were born in the mortal divine range. They were originally favored by the heavens. But now, they had become cultivation furnaces. They were on the verge of collapse. This trip was to enlighten them. The mortal gods were supposed to be powerful and noble. But now, they were the cultivation geniuses of all the powerful cultivators. It was really ironic. Since there were still 50 years left, Zhou Xuanji didn't want to wait any longer. He continued to hunt anti-Kunlun creatures. After 30 years, Zhou Xuanji's cultivation had finally reached the consummation of the 36th Grey Dao ancestor realm. The inverse chaos chi had reached an extremely majestic level. But he was still far from cultivating inverse chaos chi. It was worth mentioning that he had already earned the title of exterminating god. In the anti-Kunlun, countless creatures knew that a swordsman with exterminating divine eyes was killing people everywhere. This matter caused quite a stir because the owner of the exterminating divine eyes said that no one in the future practiced the sword. Some people had already speculated that Zhou Xuanji came from outside the anti-Kunlun. Many divine ranges even issued a bounty to hunt down Zhou Xuanji. Zhou Xuanji's strength had been growing. He could already fight against Origin Fusion Divine Lord Yiming. Once he encountered an opponent he couldn't defeat, he would immediately run away. With the Tri-Phoenix Qilin carriage, it would be very difficult for enemies below Origin Fusion Divine Lord Yiming to catch him. Just like Wei Yi in the past, no divine ability could invade the space within 100 feet. The Tri-Phoenix Qilin carriage traveled quickly in the anti-Kunlun universe. Thousands of creatures were chasing after it like a group of meteors. Each of them gritted their teeth. No matter how hard they tried, they couldn't catch up with it. It was driving them crazy. What's going on? Why can't we catch up? That magic carriage is weird. We can't teleport directly. This kid is so despicable. I can't stand it. I must catch up and kill him. Damn it, I don't believe it. Zhou Xuanji, who was in the carriage, heard the discussion behind him. The corner of his mouth rose. The Lesser Supreme Sword was still leaning against the wall of the carriage. Little Sovereign's soul was floating above the hilt. He smiled helplessly and said, "Kid, you aren't panicking at all. The number of people chasing after you will be bigger in the future." Zhou Xuanji smiled and said, "It's okay. When we get out of the void boundary, it will be my turn to kill them." He had deliberately lured so many creatures to follow him. Little Sovereign shook his head and smiled. There was a hint of ridicule in his eyes. After leaving the void boundary, the Tri-Phoenix Qilin carriage stopped. Zhou Xuanji cast the Suppressing the Universe. All the creatures chasing after him froze, unable to move. Just as he was about to make a move, he suddenly furrowed his brow. Chapter 769. What happened? Little Sovereign asked with a faint smile. Seeing Zhou Xuanji's frown, he smiled very happily. The reason why Zhou Xuanji stopped and did not attack was because he sensed an unusual aura. It was faintly discernible, as if the moment he made a move, the mysterious existence would rush out. It was definitely an existence above the Origin Fusion Divine Lord Level 4. He had encountered 3 Origin Fusion Divine Lords, but they did not give him such a terrifying feeling. He slowly sat down and controlled the Tri-Phoenix Qilin carriage to move forward. Once the Suppressing the Universe divine ability was lifted, those living beings didn't chase after him anymore. All of them were drenched in cold sweat. The Suppressing the Universe just now made them feel a lingering fear. If Zhou Xuanji acted, he would definitely be able to kill them. Why didn't he attack us? I'm not sure. Let's just forget about it exterminating divine eyes. This is too ridiculous. Whoever wants to kill me can go ahead. I give up. It's too difficult. The exterminating divine eyes are worthy of being one of the 5 ultimate divine eyes. All of the living beings exclaimed in admiration as they watched the Tri-Phoenix Qilin carriage disappear into the distance. Zhou Xuanji's sense of unease did not disappear. He could sense that the mysterious being was tracking him. Little Sovereign was also aware of it. He sighed and said, "You're going to fail this time. The other party is probably a branch master level existence." Zhou Xuanji heard him and frowned. A branch master had set his sights on him so quickly. Furthermore, the range master that he couldn't see through was definitely a divine range that was above the middle rank. There was a loud bang. The Tri-Phoenix Qilin carriage came to a sudden stop. Zhou Xuanji looked over and saw a figure appear in front of him. He used his Dao energy to block the Tri-Phoenix Qilin carriage, almost causing it to flip over. Zhou Xuanji's expression changed, and fear filled his eyes. Origin Court War God. The other party was the Origin Court War God. Compared to the sacred and domineering Origin Court War God of the Kunlun Origin Court, this Origin Court War God was wearing black armor and had a ferocious face. There were 3 black spears floating behind him, just like the evil god himself. Zhou Xuanji got up and walked out with the Lesser Supreme sword in his hand. He came to the footboard, looked at Origin Court War God, and said, "What can I do for you?" The Origin Court War God in front of him looked evil no matter how he looked at him. "You're killing people everywhere, and you're asking me why I'm here? Tell me where you came from, or I'll kill you immediately." Origin Court War God said with a sinister smile. The 3 spears of black light rose from his back, pointing straight at Zhou Xuanji. Zhou Xuanji replied calmly, "Can't you sense my background?" The auras of the creatures of the Kunlun Origin Court and the creatures of the anti-Kunlun were fundamentally different. In addition, creatures from the Kunlun Origin Court often came to anti-Kunlun. He didn't believe that the Origin Court War God couldn't guess his identity. It seemed like this guy had some ulterior motives. "How did you get here? Do you have a way to bring me to your plane?" Origin Court War God narrowed his eyes and threatened. In the anti-Kunlun, another plane had existed since ancient times. For the anti-Kunlun, the Kunlun Origin Court was also regarded as an illusory existence. Regardless of which plane was real and which was fake, the living beings in it both believed that the other was fake. "I was sent here by someone. He forced me to come here, or else he would have killed me." Zhou Xuanji replied honestly, making Origin Court War God frown. He asked, "Why did that person send you here? Let me go back alive. It's that simple. Otherwise, why would I keep killing? I want to adapt to you and find a way back. With my strength, could it be that the other party expects me to wipe you all out? Do you think that's believable?" Seeing Zhou Xuanji acting like a hoodlum, Origin Court War God fell into silence. Zhou Xuanji continued, "Where I come from, you are my son's revered teacher. Are you sure you want to kill me?" As soon as he said this, Origin Court War God's face immediately turned gloomy. He felt that Zhou Xuanji was playing with him. Zhou Xuanji continued without giving him a chance to speak. He told him what he knew about Origin Court War God. When Zhou Xuanji mentioned Be Sovereign, Origin Court War God's expression softened. In the anti-Kunlun, Origin Court War God and Be Sovereign still had the best relationship. He was no longer righteous, but evil and murderous. Be Sovereign was no longer domineering and mighty. Instead, he was a yes man. "In that case, take me there. We will depend on each other in the future. How about it? I can help you kill your enemies," Origin Court War God said. Origin Court War God said with some expectation in his eyes. Zhou Xuanji raised his brow and asked, "Why do you want to leave the anti-Kunlun?" Origin Court War God glared at him and said, "You are the anti-Kunlun. I have offended the Sovereign. The Sovereign is trying to punish me. Once he catches me, he can get rid of me fair and square. I am not his opponent." Zhou Xuanji was delighted. "Is this a hired thug coming to my door?" He pretended to hesitate and said, "If you want to leave the anti-Kunlun, you have to leave from the Sovereign's place. But you have to wait for me to cultivate a special divine ability." Little Sovereign had said that the native creatures of the anti-Kunlun couldn't learn the inverse chaos divine ability. Origin Court War God said solemnly, "It's okay. I will wait for you. When can you learn it?" As soon as he thought of the Sovereign, a murderous intent flashed in his eyes. Zhou Xuanji sighed with emotion. In the Kunlun Origin Court War God was the Sovereign's loyal lackey. But in the anti-Kunlun, he was the Sovereign's mortal enemy. No matter how good the relationship between ruler and subject was, it couldn't compare to the beautiful brotherhood. "I need to kill your creatures to obtain the inverse chaos chi, which is equivalent to your luck. Otherwise, I can't break through the boundary here," Zhou Xuanji replied. Zhou Xuanji. His eyes were so honest that Origin Court War God couldn't find anything fishy about it. Origin Court War God nodded and said, "Okay, I will take you to kill." Zhou Xuanji was pleasantly surprised. It was like a pie had fallen from the sky. However, he quickly calmed down. The Origin Court War God in front of him wasn't the Kunlun Origin Court War God, who knew if he could keep his word. Origin Court War God disappeared into thin air, stunning Zhou Xuanji. The Lesser Supreme sword slightly trembled as Little Sovereign transmitted his voice. "Be careful. This guy is very strong. It will be easy for him to kill you." Zhou Xuanji understood this. But facing Origin Court War God, he couldn't escape. After a while, Origin Court War God returned. With a wave of his right hand, countless creatures appeared out of thin air. All of them froze, unable to move. Each and every one of them looked horrified. Zhou Xuanji scanned them with his divine will. There were at least 1,000,000 of them. He was shocked. Where did this guy catch so many creatures? Origin Court War God looked at him and signaled him to take action with his eyes. Zhou Xuanji sighed in his heart. He had no choice. First, he used the extreme nightmare abyss, making millions of creatures fall into a sweet dream. Next, he used the ultimate chaos Dao, turning them into ashes. A majestic inverse chaos chi poured into his body, making his blood boil. Origin Court War God smiled in satisfaction. It seemed that Zhou Xuanji didn't lie to him. He could clearly feel that Zhou Xuanji's cultivation was improving. As long as I can escape, Origin Court War God's eyes turned fiery. He pinned his hopes on Zhou Xuanji. Chapter 770. Zhou Xuanji adjusted the inverse chaos chi in his body and slowly opened his eyes. He looked at Origin Court War God and said, "Thank you." Origin Court War God waved his hand and said, "You and I each take what we need. If possible, we might be able to rely on each other in the future. I have done so many things for the Kunlun Origin Court, but Supremes still hate me. Those divine ranges even insult me behind my back, causing my luck to be unable to grow. It is really hateful." Speaking of this matter, he gritted his teeth. Seeing how angry he was, Zhou Xuanji could only pretend to feel pity. "Okay, from now on, you and I will cooperate. When we reach the Kunlun Origin Court, I will take you to see Be Sovereign. Of course, you can go anywhere you want." Zhou Xuanji said seriously to show his sincerity. Origin Court War God nodded and said, "Let's go. I will take you to a very annoying divine range. You have to use your exterminating divine eyes to block time and space. Otherwise, supremacy will notice." When Zhou Xuanji heard this, he couldn't help but ask curiously, "The Sovereign won't notice the divine ability of the exterminating divine eyes?" In his opinion, a supremacy was omnipotent. The reason why the Kunlun Origin Court was in chaos was because of the mysterious disappearance of the Supremes. Origin Court War God smiled evilly and said, "He doesn't have the time to pay attention to the entire Kunlun Origin Court. Otherwise, he wouldn't need me." After that, he flew past Zhou Xuanji toward anti-Kunlun. Zhou Xuanji immediately put away the Tri-Phoenix Qilin carriage and quickly followed Origin Court War God. Along the way, Zhou Xuanji pretended to be relaxed, but he was very alert in his heart. Little Sovereign was also communicating with him via sound transmission, telling him what he needed to pay attention to. 30 minutes later, they arrived in front of a divine range. This divine range was located in a rather remote area with no living beings coming and going. Origin Court War God condensed 3 black spears of light behind him. His eyes narrowed, and one of the black spears of light shot out, directly breaking the array of the divine pulse silently. He waved his right hand and brought Zhou Xuanji inside. The hole in the spell formation recovered at a speed visible to the naked eye, returning to its original appearance. After entering the divine pulse, Origin Court War God said in a deep voice, "Use your previous magical power." Zhou Xuanji heard him and immediately used the suppressing the universe, freezing the space within the entire divine range. Origin Court War God raised his right arm, and the 3 black spears behind him spun violently. The violent black light raged in all directions. Who dares to invade the great hidden divine range? With a loud roar, Origin Court War God disappeared from where he stood. Zhou Xuanji did not attack, but waited patiently on the spot. He believed in the strength of Origin Court War God, and that he could do what he said. After a long while, Origin Court War God appeared in front of him and said with an evil smile, "Okay, you can start harvesting now. I have suppressed the cultivation of those stronger than you. They're like lambs waiting to be slaughtered." Zhou Xuanji nodded and immediately took out thousands of swords, ordering them to kill on their own. Now, including the divine swords he had duplicated with the golden treasure basket, he had more than 5,000 divine swords in total. With a thought, he used the extreme nightmare abyss to cover the entire great hidden god range, causing everyone to fall into a beautiful dream. Then, he repeated the same trick. Zhou Xuanji did not want to see what happened next, and he allowed the legendary swords to do as they pleased. He asked in his heart, "Little sovereign, are we really doing the right thing?" He had been trying hard to convince himself that anti-Kunlun did not exist. Otherwise, how could the composition of the 2 Kunlun origin courts be the same? There are not so many whys. Only when you are strong enough can you achieve everything you want, whether it is justice or fairness, Little Sovereign said in an indifferent tone. Little Sovereign said in an indifferent tone, but he was somewhat gratified in his heart. This kid has a benevolent and righteous heart. Killing enemies becomes a habit. It is easy to lose compassion for life. But after becoming the sovereign, he would have compassion for the common people. In the empty and invincible years, his compassion would be rekindled, and he would reflect on his own mistakes. This was something that every supreme martial artist would encounter. Being invincible was lonely, and loneliness would make one's imagination run wild. Even I can't figure out the existence of anti-Kunlun. If you want to understand all this, then you have to become the sovereign. Become the sovereign that surpasses me, the sovereign that surpasses the past and the present. Understand? Little Sovereign advised. After getting along with Zhou Xuanji for so long, he liked Zhou Xuanji more and more. To be precise, he liked this kid's temperament. He was decisive but not cruel. He was bold but not reckless. He was adaptable. When this kid became the sovereign, he might reach a height that he had never reached. Zhou Xuanji fell into silence as he fell into deep thought. Even the sovereign didn't understand why anti-Kunlun existed. Then, how was anti-Kunlun born? Was it created by some existence, or was it guided by some powerful rules? No matter what, this power might very well be above that of a supreme being. Origin Court War God looked at Zhou Xuanji with interest. He didn't say a word. After this divine range was slaughtered, the berserk inverse chaos chi poured into his body, setting off a strong wind around him. The wind quickly grew and turned into a hurricane. Inverse chaos chi, what a pity. Origin Court War God clicked his tongue in amazement. Origin Court War God clicked his tongue in wonder. He really wanted this power, but he belonged to anti-Kunlun, so it was impossible for him to comprehend the inverse chaos energy. This was limited by the rules, unless he surpassed them. Perhaps, only the sovereign of anti-Kunlun could surpass these rules. Zhou Xuanji began suppressing the inverse chaos chi. Great! If this goes on, You will soon be able to cultivate the inverse chaos divine ability, Little Sovereign said excitedly. He had to admit that it was really cool to have a powerful expert leading the way. All he needed to do was to reap the harvest. Zhou Xuanji didn't answer. His mind was completely focused on the inverse chaos divine ability. Time flew by. It took him a full 7 days to suppress all the inverse chaos chi in his body. Origin Court War God said with a smile, "Let's continue." He was looking forward to seeing what the inverse chaos divine ability looked like. Plus, he wanted to leave anti-Kunlun. So he did his best and had a good temper. Zhou Xuanji nodded, and the two quickly left. After a month, Zhou Xuanji and Origin Court War God flew out of divine range and quickly flew toward the void boundary. At this moment, Zhou Xuanji was trembling all over, leaving behind countless afterimages. His aura was extremely unstable. He was receiving the inheritance of the inverse chaos divine ability. Origin Court War God lifted him up with his Tao energy and flew toward the void boundary. Along the way, Origin Court War God was observing Zhou Xuanji. Little Sovereign wasn't idle either. He kept transmitting his Tao to help Zhou Xuanji calm down. Zhou Xuanji was in an extremely mysterious state. He felt that two similar but completely different memories were attacking his mind. He saw everything in Kunlun Origin Court and anti-Kunlun. All the same but opposite things appeared at the same time, shaking his soul. Little Sovereign's Tao voice continued to echo in his ears, preventing him from getting lost. Gradually, he understood the true essence of the inverse chaos divine ability. Reverse everything, primordial chaos. Reverse the beginning and end, create and transform. Turn the universe into the sovereign. Chapter 771. Zhou Xuanji's mind was confused by the inheritance of the inverse chaos divine ability. Gradually, he lost his perception of his surroundings. He seemed to have experienced a long time. Two planes with the same essence, but completely different development, made him lost. Even the Tao voice of Little Sovereign couldn't pull him back. After an unknown period of time, perhaps it would be a day, perhaps it would be a year, perhaps it would be 1,000 autumns. Zhou Xuanji felt like he was dreaming. He suddenly woke up from his dream. He grabbed his forehead with his right hand and gasped for breath. His whole body was covered in cold sweat. "You're awake? Have you learned it?" Origin Court War God's voice floated over from the side, his tone full of ridicule. Zhou Xuanji looked at him in confusion, feeling as if his head was going to explode. This kind of hardship made him wish he was dead. He quickly took out the Holy Light Redemption Sword and stabbed it into his abdomen to heal himself. Origin Court War God looked at him with interest and stopped talking. Zhou Xuanji looked around and found that he was sitting on a barren wasteland. Above his head was a resplendent, starry sky, and looking into the distance, he could see floating islands. Where's this place? He was puzzled, but he didn't even have the strength to speak. The Tao energy and inverse chaos chi in his body had already disappeared. It was as if he was crippled. Inverse chaos divine ability. Zhou Xuanji's eyes sparkled. When the dizziness and pain in his head subsided, a wonderful feeling welled up in his heart. It was the inverse chaos divine ability. This feeling was very mysterious, and he couldn't explain it clearly, but he could feel the existence of the inverse chaos divine ability. Any existence could be reversed by the inverse chaos divine art. At the same time, his body began to absorb Tao power involuntarily. "Your aura has changed. It has become the same as ours." He rubbed his chin in thought. Even though his cultivation was high, he couldn't see the changes in Zhou Xuanji. Zhou Xuanji recovered some of his strength and replied in a hoarse voice, "Yes, I've already learned the divine ability to go back. However, I need more inverse chaos chi to strengthen and familiarize myself with this divine ability." Origin Court War God nodded. Zhou Xuanji had mentioned these requirements before. "Just you wait." Origin Court War God dropped these words and disappeared. Zhou Xuanji took out the Lesser Supreme Sword and continued to comprehend the inverse chaos divine ability. "Brat, You're amazing. You succeeded so quickly. Little Sovereign exclaimed in admiration. When he inherited the inverse chaos spirit technique, he had suffered for a long time, hovering between life and death. Zhou Xuanji asked, when we reach the peak of anti-Kunlun, how do we escape with the inverse chaos divine ability? Don't worry, you're not strong enough yet. Don't think about this for now. Zhou Xuanji's breakthrough speed was already exaggerated enough, but this kid was still anxious. Sometimes, Little Sovereign wanted to strangle him to death. He really didn't know how lucky he was. However, he understood Zhou Xuanji's mentality. He was worried about his family. He still had the mentality of a mortal. Zhou Xuanji could only stop asking questions and focus on cultivating. Time ticked by. His mind became clearer, and his understanding of the inverse chaos divine art also became clearer. 3 hours later, Origin Court War God returned. There was a frightening scar on his chest, and it was filled with all kinds of black crystals. It was especially terrifying. He flew up to Zhou Xuanji and waved his right hand. A ball of light appeared out of nowhere, and it was a divine range. He actually captured a divine range in his palm. What kind of domineering power was this? Zhou Xuanji said, "Give me some time." He needed to restore his cultivation. Otherwise, he wouldn't even be able to kill a divine range creature standing still. Origin Court War God nodded and then threw the ball of light on the ground. He then walked to the side and began to heal himself. The atmosphere became silent. After a month, Zhou Xuanji recovered to his peak state and slaughtered all the divine ranges in the ball of light. The amount of inverse chaos chi he absorbed was far more than before. No wonder Origin Court War God was injured. It seemed that this divine range wasn't simple. However, Zhou Xuanji was very curious. This was already the third divine range. Why hadn't the sovereign heard about it yet? Could it be that the sovereign of anti-Kunlun had also mysteriously disappeared, just like the Kunlun Origin Court? He raised this doubt. How is that possible? That guy is alive and well. It's impossible for him to have disappeared. It's just that he's too lazy. He pushes everything to his subordinates. Most of the time, he is in closed-door cultivation. He would only come out once in a while. Now is the time for his closed-door cultivation. He won't open his eyes for at least 10,000 years, Origin Court War God said, waving his hand. Zhou Xuanji was immediately interested in the sovereign. What kind of sovereign would be so ambitious and obsessed with cultivation? Isn't the cultivation of the sovereign the strongest? Okay, let's continue. Origin Court War God got up and said. Origin Court War God got up and said. He couldn't wait to leave anti-Kunlun. Once the sovereign came out, he would definitely die. So he was even more anxious than Zhou Xuanji. Okay, Zhou Xuanji nodded. The two quickly left and continued to hunt in anti-Kunlun. Kunlun Origin Court, evil sky divine range, pure sword heaven, at the edge of the forest, beside a small river. Zhou Tanhua was cultivating while facing the river. He still maintained the appearance of teenager. The surface of the lake surged as a figure rose up. It was Zhou Fa. Aren't you annoying? I already said that I don't want to mess around with you. Zhou Tanhua didn't open his eyes. Instead, he frowned and reprimanded. In recent years, Zhou Fa always came to harass him, which made him very annoyed. Zhou Fa said with an evil smile, "Your father's fate is no longer with him. He is very likely to be in danger. You don't have a father who has become a sovereign. How can you grow? Follow me. I will help you become a sovereign. In the future I see, you will rise in the dark period and sweep the sovereign list. However, there is a genius stronger than you. When you are in high spirits and glorious, he will step on you to ascend." Zhou Tanhua was indifferent. He was still very impatient. He was tired of hearing these words. Every time it was the same words. Are you tired? Let's make a bet. Within 100 years, the evil sky divine range will perish. If the evil sky divine range perishes, you will follow me. If it doesn't perish, I will be your slave in the future, Zhou Fa said with a meaningful smile. Zhou Fa said with a meaningful smile. Zhou Tanhua opened his eyes when he heard this. Zhou Tianhua was born in the evil sky divine range. He still had a lot of feelings for the evil sky divine range. It could be said that in pure sword heaven, he valued the evil sky divine range the most. After all, Be Sovereign would occasionally come to visit him. What do you mean? What information did you get? Zhou Tianhua asked with a frown. He suddenly lost his composure. Zhou Fa shook his head and said, "The destiny of the evil sky divine range is exhausted. It will perish. Just wait and see. If you figure out, contact me. You should still keep the dagger I gave you." After saying this, Zhou Fa turned into a pool of water and merged into the river. Zhou Tianhua got up and paced back and forth. His heart was heavy, and he couldn't calm down for a long time. He immediately turned around and went to look for his mother. At this moment, Xian Xianghua and Jiang Shui were chatting in the small pavilion under the tree. They were naturally talking about the turmoil in the evil sky divine range. Evening Zhuge was sent to participate in the war. Although the evil sky divine range was harmonious, countless creatures died outside every day. Chapter 772. Zhou Tianhua appeared beside Xian Xianghua out of thin air and said anxiously, "Mother, is our divine range in danger?" Normally, he would focus on cultivation and ignore the affairs of the world. However, when he heard that the evil sky divine range was about to perish, he could no longer maintain his usual calmness. Xian Xianghua frowned and asked, "Who said that? Is it that Zhou Fa?" They also knew that Zhou Fa often looked for Zhou Tianhua. They had even told Be Sovereign about it. However, Zhou Fa was so powerful that they couldn't catch him. "Just tell me if it's true or not," Zhou Tianhua urged as he stared at his mother. Jiang Shui smiled. "Don't worry. With your father around, the evil sky divine range won't perish." Xian Xianghua nodded in agreement. "But father still hasn't returned. Where is he?" Zhou Tianhua asked hesitantly. He admired his father very much, but he also understood that Zhou Xuanji's strength was really not enough in the Kunlun origin court. Zhou Xuanji didn't belong to the top ranks of the sovereign list. Xian Xianghua glared at him and snorted. "Don't worry, your father will come back sooner or later. You will understand how many miracles he created when he was your age." Zhou Tianhua had no choice but to give up. He had started cultivating early, and he was already very vague about the stories he had heard about Zhou Xuanji when he was young. As such, he felt that his two mothers trusted Zhou Xuanji too much. For a moment, he was worried about his gains and losses. His father's whereabouts were unknown. The evil sky divine range was still on the brink of death, and his two mothers didn't care about anything. He was very flustered. What should I do? Zhou Tianhua frowned and left in a daze. Jiang Shui glanced at him and asked worriedly, "Will he be all right? You should pay more attention to him. If he can't figure it out and gets kidnapped by Zhou Fa, it won't be good." Xian Xianghua felt that it made sense. She immediately got up and left to chase after Zhou Tianhua. "Brat, do you want to know more about your father?" Xian Xianghua patted the back of his head and asked with a smile. At first glance, others would think that they were brother and sister, not mother and son, because she didn't have her mother's composure. Zhou Tianhua froze for a moment and subconsciously wanted to refuse. But Xian Xianghua grabbed his shoulder, and both mother and son disappeared into thin air. Jiang Shui sat in front of the stone table, supporting her chin with her hand. With a smile on her face, she sank into her memories. Every time she saw Zhou Tianhua, she thought of Zhou Xuanji when he was young. She and Zhou Xuanji had depended on each other since they were young, and she would always remember what Zhou Xuanji looked like when he was young. Every time she thought about it, she felt very happy. Their love was not easy to come by, and it was hard to remember. Anti-Kunlun. Xiao. Xiao. Zhou Xuanji and Origin Court War gods shuttled through the void boundary at extremely fast speed. Behind them, there was a large group of beings chasing after them. There were at least 1,000 of them, and the weakest of them was at the 9 vast heavens realm. Origin Court War God had already destroyed 7 divine ranges with Zhou Xuanji. Zhou Xuanji had completely mastered the inverse chaos divine ability. But the anti-Kunlun had also erupted. Thousands of origin fusion divine lords and 9 vast heavens cultivators were chasing after them. Even someone as strong as the Origin Court War, God, couldn't stop the attack of so many experts. Some of the Origin Fusion Divine Lords had surpassed the 5 realms. If this goes on, we'll be caught, Zhou Xuanji said in a low voice. He continuously used suppressing the universe, but he was still unable to increase the distance between them and the enemy. Origin Court War God was also very anxious, but his face was very cold. He didn't panic. Seeing that he didn't speak, Zhou Xuanji began to think of a way to escape. Idiot, use the inverse chaos divine ability. Little Sovereign's voice rang in his ears. Zhou Xuanji was stunned. Can the inverse chaos divine ability resolve this situation? Without hesitation, he immediately used the inverse chaos divine ability. A faint layer of light burst out from his body as the space behind him fluctuated. Thousands of experts only felt that they had hit an invisible barrier. Immediately afterward, Zhou Xuanji and Origin Court War God disappeared before their eyes. They were stunned, but they didn't slow down. Origin Court War God looked back and was stunned to find that all the enemies were flying backward. The corner of Zhou Xuanji's mouth rose. The inverse chaos divine ability is really powerful. The enemies were still flying forward. The reason was that their senses were temporarily blocked. They thought that Zhou Xuanji and Origin Court War God were in front of them. The distance between the two sides instantly widened. How did you do it? Origin Court War God asked in surprise. It seemed that what this kid said before was true. That divine ability was really strong. Even he couldn't see clearly what was going on. Zhou Xuanji replied, "The inverse chaos divine ability can reverse everything. I didn't expect that it could even reverse the direction." He really didn't expect that the inverse chaos divine ability could be used in this way. Reverse the direction and mix divine sense. Origin Court War God sighed in his heart. Why can't I use this divine ability? The two quickly fled. When those experts came back to their senses, they could no longer find their whereabouts. They came to a planet and began to rest and cultivate. Today's battle had given Zhou Xuanji a deeper understanding of the inverse chaos divine ability. This divine ability must be mastered. It would definitely be a life-saving trump card to kill the enemy in the future. He sat down cross-legged and entered a state of cultivation. Origin Court War God, sitting on a rock next to him, stared at Zhou Xuanji thoughtfully. He was interested in the inverse chaos divine ability. He suddenly wanted to plunder this divine ability. However, compared to the divine ability, he wanted to leave anti-Kunlun more. So he was in a dilemma. He understood that he had to quell this greed. Zhou Xuanji closed his eyes and focused on cultivating. That guy is greedy. Be careful, Little Sovereign reminded him. Little Sovereign reminded with a teasing tone. Ever since he came to anti-Kunlun, Zhou Xuanji had been holding the Lesser Supreme sword most of the time. It was equivalent to having an extra pair of eyes and an extra sense of awe. Zhou Xuanji's expression did not change. He had already guessed this, so he did not panic. Fortunately, Origin Court War God didn't make a move. 9 days passed just like that. On this day, the peace was broken. What do you want? A familiar voice came, and Zhou Xuanji opened his eyes in shock. Be sovereign. Origin Court War God opened his eyes, and his expression turned ugly. Zhou Xuanji noticed his subtle expression. Beast Sovereign appeared above their heads, looking down at them with a furious expression. Zhou Xuanji was puzzled. This Beast Sovereign didn't look timid at all. He was still very strong, and his eyes looked very gloomy. I didn't expect you to find this place. Origin Court War God snorted coldly and slowly stood up. 3 black spears of light floated behind him, ready for battle. At this point, Zhou Xuanji finally understood. F***CK. Origin Court War God and Beast Sovereign were enemies in anti-Kunlun. Furthermore, they were mortal enemies. Sure enough, it was the opposite relationship. Beast Sovereign raised his palm and slammed it down. Origin Court War God followed suit. Boom! The entire planet exploded in an instant. Zhou Xuanji relied on the inverse chaos divine ability to reflect the damage and quickly moved away, dodging their battle. Beast Sovereign and Origin Court War God fought fiercely in the void. Their figures intertwined, forcing Zhou Xuanji to stay away from them. He didn't dare to come close to the area of 10,000 miles. Chapter 773. Boom, boom, boom. Beast Sovereign and Origin Court War God crazily collided like two rainbows. All kinds of magical abilities were at their fingertips, and their destructive power was extremely strong. The void boundary shook violently. Zhou Xuanji watched with narrowed eyes and asked softly, "How high are their cultivations?" Little Sovereign replied with a sound transmission. Peak Origin Fusion Divine Lord. The difference in stages within Origin Fusion Divine Lord was huge. The gap between each stage was almost insurmountable, unless one was like Zhou Xuanji, who had endless trump cards, and each of them was a great serendipity. Zhou Xuanji's eyes flickered. Even someone as strong as Beast Sovereign is only at the peak of Origin Fusion Divine Lord. Then, what kind of realm would it be if he took another step forward? Somehow, he felt that the Supremes weren't the strongest. Otherwise, where would the previous Supremes have gone to? Why did the current Supremes still cultivate so hard? And why did the Supremes of the Kunlun Origin Court disappear? There were too many riddles that he couldn't understand, but it also made him very interested in the position of a Supreme Being. After ascending to the throne of the strongest in the Kunlun Origin Court, he might be able to see everything clearly. Zhou Xuanji didn't leave. He still wanted to rely on Origin Court War God to fight his way out. How could he leave? Moreover, he had inquired in the Kunlun Origin Court that Origin Court War God and Beast Sovereign often fought, and most of the time, Origin Court War God won. However, this was anti-Kunlun. Zhou Xuanji frowned and tried his best not to overthink. The battle lasted for a long time, and even Zhou Xuanji felt quite tired. These two were in a love-hate relationship. When would victor be decided? In the Kunlun Origin Court, Beast Sovereign could give up everything for the Origin Court War God. In the anti-Kunlun, Beast Sovereign could do anything to kill the Origin Court War God. TSK. Just as Zhou Xuanji was watching the show, Beast Sovereign suddenly punched through Origin Court War God's chest, blasting the void behind Origin Court War God. The Origin Court War God was shocked and hurriedly dodged. A burst of black gas emerged from behind Beast Sovereign. Like a black net, it enveloped Origin Court War God. In an instant, the two of them were in a black ball. Zhou Xuanji furrowed his brow. Would Origin Court War God be defeated? Little Sovereign reminded them. Aren't you going to run? That guy is dead for sure. Zhou Xuanji heard him and immediately reacted. He quickly escaped. During the flight, he had a strange expression. He really didn't expect this to happen. He thought that Origin Court War God might die, but he never thought that Origin Court War God would die in the hands of Beast Sovereign. Zhou Xuanji suddenly thought of himself. Would he die at the hands of the people closest to him? They were closest to each other in the Kunlun Origin Court, but it was very likely that they would become enemies here. He shook his head and smiled, too lazy to think too much about it. He would try his best to avoid his family in the Kunlun Origin Court. 12 hours had passed since they started their journey. Zhou Xuanji came to the other side of anti-Kunlun. Just as he found a foothold, Beast Sovereign came to his door and appeared in front of him out of thin air. "Kid, where do you think you're going?" Beast Sovereign sneered. His eyes were dark and fierce, like a poisonous dragon. Zhou Xuanji panicked in his heart, but he looked calm on the surface. "Do you have enmity with me?" He glanced over and saw Beast Sovereign holding Origin Court War God's head in his right hand. Origin Court War God's face was ferocious, and his eyes were full of killing intent. Seeing this head, Zhou Xuanji realized how terrifying Beast Sovereign was. After one's cultivation surpassed the Saint Realm, one would generally destroy the enemy's body and soul. Leaving the head behind showed that there was still a certain gap in strength between the two sides. "Why are you with Origin Court War God?" And, are you from Anti-Kunlun? Beast Sovereign asked, staring at Zhou Xuanji. For the creatures of Anti-Kunlun, Kunlun Origin Court was Anti-Kunlun. Zhou Xuanji replied, he wants to use me to leave this place. You should have already confirmed the last question. Beast Sovereign narrowed his eyes and asked, do you have a way to go back? He had seen many creatures from Kunlun Origin Court die here. None of them could go back. After all, those who could go back were all sovereigns. Yes, if you let me go, I will repay you one day, Zhou Xuanji nodded. Zhou Xuanji nodded. He was curious in his heart. Why didn't the Beast Sovereign kill him? Could it be that he also wants to leave Anti-Kunlun? Beast Sovereign asked, if you leave this place, how will you repay me? Zhou Xuanji shook his head and said, any verbal promise is meaningless, but forming a good relationship is also a hope for you. I have no reason to harm you. I kill to become stronger. There are so many divine ranges. Your evil sky divine range is a super divine range. Only if my brain is damaged would I go looking for trouble with you. Beast Sovereign fell into deep thought. His eyes were filled with scrutiny, never leaving Zhou Xuanji. After a long while, he said, help me do one thing, and I won't chase you. Zhou Xuanji nodded. He had no other choice now. Even with the inverse chaos divine ability, he wasn't sure he could defeat Beast Sovereign. Go to the mortal divine range and capture the mortal god sisters. You don't have to worry about danger. I will take the lead, and then you will take them away. Remember, you must bring them to me in one piece, Beast Sovereign said in a deep voice. Beast Sovereign asked in a deep voice. Zhou Xuanji was a little surprised when he heard this. Why is he also targeting the mortal gods? Okay, when will we act? Zhou Xuanji agreed. He was thinking that he could take this opportunity to intercept the mortal gods. The corner of Beast Sovereign's mouth rose as he waved his right hand. Zhou Xuanji suddenly felt the universe shrink. The sky turned dark. Before he could react, Beast Sovereign disappeared, leaving him alone in absolute darkness. You stay here and wait for my order. Beast Sovereign's voice floated in. Zhou Xuanji furrowed his brow when he heard Beast Sovereign's voice. This guy is really overbearing. Killing intent rose in Zhou Xuanji's heart, but he could only endure it for the time being. Although your physical strength is not as good as his, you have the inverse chaos divine ability. You can escape. Little Sovereign's voice rang in his ears, causing him to be stunned. How can I escape? The inverse chaos divine ability can reverse everything. If you reverse time and space, he naturally won't be able to find you, Little Sovereign said with a contemptuous smile. Zhou Xuanji wasn't pleasantly surprised after hearing this. Instead, he was thinking about his future plan. Since that was the case, he could use the inverse chaos divine ability after capturing the mortal gods. Thinking of this, the corner of his mouth rose into a strange smile. Beast Sovereign didn't speak for a while. Zhou Xuanji wasn't idle either. He was concentrating on cultivation. After 3 years, get ready to act. Beast Sovereign's voice was like a clap of thunder, resounding through this dark space. Zhou Xuanji opened his eyes and immediately got up, ready to fight. Suddenly, a screen of light appeared in front of him. There were 2 women on the screen. One looked cold and elegant. She was wearing a luxurious palace dress. The other looked only 16 or 17 years old. She had a delicate face and was wearing a red dress. She looked terrified. Both women were devastatingly beautiful and had outstanding temperaments. At this moment, they were leaning against each other like princesses in distress. Huh? Zhou Xuanji's eyes widened. He suddenly discovered that the girl in red looked very similar to the mortal gods he had seen in the Kunlun Origin Court. But that mortal god had no hair. She looked like a little nun. Chapter 774. Zhou Xuanji became curious about the mortal god sisters on the light screen. Since the girl in red might be the same person as the mortal god of the Kunlun Origin Court, then who was this woman in the palace dress? At the same time, the 2 mortal gods were in a panic. Sister, what should we do? The red-clothed girl asked nervously. She had been curled up in the arms of the palace-dressed woman, hugging her tightly. The woman in the palace dress was also very nervous. Although they were mortal gods, they hadn't awakened their innate talent, and their cultivation wasn't high. In the face of the powerful beast sovereign in front of them, they could only be frightened. The woman comforted him. "Don't be afraid. I'm here." They were in the middle of an array, protected by dozens of origin fusion divine lords. A great battle was taking place in front of them. The mortal divine range's old ancestors were surrounding beast sovereign. In the distance, there were still countless evil sky divine range experts blocking the way. There was no way to escape. If your mortal divine range doesn't cherish the mortal god, then leave it to me. Beast sovereign laughed wildly, his murderous aura thick and dense. The patriarchs of the mortal divine range almost exploded with rage. "Beast sovereign, you're courting death. Is your evil sky divine range worthy of fighting with our sovereign divine range? When we return, we will definitely bring an army to flatten your evil sky divine range. Don't talk nonsense with him. Kill him. You are too arrogant. This old man will make you regret it. Don't let him escape." All of these ancestors possessed remarkable abilities. Every move they made was extremely powerful and could shake the universe. Zhou Xuanji watched the battle from the dark space. The light screen that Beast Sovereign had turned on for him was always facing the mortal god sisters, so he couldn't see the whole battlefield. He waited patiently for an opportunity. "When we get out, we'll kidnap them. Get ready." Beast Sovereign's voice sounded again, and after 3 seconds, the dark space suddenly shattered. Zhou Xuanji was pulled to the mortal god sisters by a violent suction force. The mortal deities were also frightened and subconsciously retreated. Zhou Xuanji moved extremely quickly. He quickly reached out and pulled them into his arms. Then he cast the inverse chaos divine ability, reversing the space within a radius of 10 feet. The surrounding origin fusion divine lords were shocked and furious. Just when they were about to attack, Zhou Xuanji and the other two disappeared before their eyes. They were instantly dumbfounded. What was going on? They immediately used their divine sense to search, but they were unable to find any traces of Zhou Xuanji and the others. The expression of Beast Sovereign, who was fighting, changed. He suddenly felt that something was wrong, because he could not sense Zhou Xuanji's aura either. Where did that kid go? Zhou Xuanji looked at the murky space around him and was pleasantly surprised. Apart from the mortal god sisters next to him, he could no longer feel the aura of any other living beings. "What do you want?" The woman in the palace dress asked warily. The red-clothed girl in her arms was so scared that she almost cried. Zhou Xuanji looked back at them and said with a smile, "I heard that mortal gods can help people cultivate, so I need your help." As soon as he said this, the two women's faces turned pale. They naturally knew about these things. So, ever since they found out that they were mortal gods, they had been in despair. Who would have thought that misfortune would come so quickly? The girl in red gritted her teeth, her eyes red. She raised her right hand and prepared to stab her throat. "Don't be in such a hurry. The help I'm talking about isn't those lowly, third-rate methods. I want to talk to you about cultivation methods. Otherwise, I wouldn't have allowed you to stand before me unscathed, right?" Zhou Xuanji immediately interjected. The two women were stunned after hearing this. He helplessly said, "I have 2 wives, a son, and a daughter. I'm not that desperate." The two women's eyes immediately lit up when they heard this. The woman in the palace dress asked with a frown, "Who are you? Can you tell us your name?" Zhou Xuanji smiled and said, "My name is Zhou Xuanji. I'm not from your Kunlun origin court. In fact, the Kunlun origin court has 2 planes. The composition of living beings is the same, but the development is completely different. I come from the other plane. I want to become stronger, strong enough to leave this place." Hearing this, the girl in red excitedly asked, "Then, can you take us with you? We also want to leave this place." They had also heard of the existence of anti-Kunlun before. As long as they left with Zhou Xuanji, they could get rid of the shackles of the mortal divine range and their destiny. Zhou Xuanji said meaningfully, "In the other Kunlun origin court, the mortal gods have the same destiny as you. However, if you help me become stronger, I will protect you in the future." The two women fell into despair when they heard the first half of Zhou Xuanji's words. But when they heard the second half, they were pleasantly surprised. Zhou Xuanji took out the lesser supreme sword as Little Sovereign's soul floated out. The two women were so scared that they hugged each other again. Little Sovereign floated in the air, looking at the two women. He then said with a satisfied smile, "They seem to have good aptitudes. Maybe they can really awaken into mortal gods. It's a waste to use them as furnaces. They should be cultivated." His words immediately made the two women feel relieved. The soul's words obviously didn't mean to harm them. Zhou Xuanji asked, "Aren't they mortal gods?" Little Sovereign smiled contemptuously and said, "They just have the bloodline of mortal gods." How can a real mortal god be controlled by others? A real mortal god can be powerful enough to suppress the sovereign divine range. They are invincible under the sovereign. His words made the two women excited. Zhou Xuanji also knew how powerful mortal gods were, but his priority wasn't to cultivate them, but to help him become stronger. Little Sovereign saw through his thoughts and chuckled. "Actually, I know a way. Once these two mortal gods awaken their talents and cultivate with you, they can guide the inverse chaos chi into your body, helping your cultivation soar. Not only that, but they can also become stronger," Little Sovereign explained with a smile. The eyes of the two mortal gods couldn't help but light up. They also wanted to become stronger. As long as they became stronger, they could get rid of their destiny. If it was as Little Sovereign said, they were powerful enough to suppress the mortal divine range. "Tell me," Zhou Xuanji urged. He had been an anti-Kunlun for a long time. He didn't want to wait any longer. Little Sovereign rolled his eyes and said with a sinister smile, "I can teach you this method, but there are some shortcomings in this method. When you cultivate, the inverse chaos chi will become violent. You must cultivate naked. The magical clothes will block the flow of the inverse chaos chi. Ordinary clothes will also turn into ashes." As soon as he finished speaking, the atmosphere instantly turned awkward. Zhou Xuanji was speechless. The mortal god sisters blushed and lowered their heads. Little Sovereign raised his brow and said, "One of you wants to become a sovereign and go against fate. The other two have a bad fate. Why don't you get married? Think about it. If you succeed in the future, you will be a sovereign and two mortal gods. You will be able to create an unprecedented golden age. No supreme martial artist could have two mortal gods who had grown to the pinnacle." Just thinking about it made Little Sovereign a little excited. Zhou Xuanji rolled his eyes at him and angrily said, "Nonsense, I don't want to marry anyone. I won't accept any woman if I have no feelings." These words didn't humiliate the two mortal gods. On the contrary, they looked at him in a different light. Chapter 775. Zhou Xuanji found it a little hard to accept the cultivation method that Little Sovereign had told him. The mortal god sisters remained silent. They also wanted to become stronger, and Zhou Xuanji had a dignified appearance and treated them well. Following someone like this was much better than becoming a cauldron for some old ancestor. What's there to bicker about? This is the only way for your cultivation base to increase quickly. Otherwise, you'll only be able to use them as cultivation materials. Little Sovereign glared at Zhou Xuanji with dissatisfaction. Why was Zhou Xuanji so hesitant at such a critical moment? Weren't you the one who insisted on obtaining the mortal god? Zhou Xuanji hesitated for a moment before sighing and saying, "All right, pass the cultivation method to us. When the time comes, I will close my eyes and shut off my divine sense. I will not look at indecent things." Hearing this, the two mortal gods nodded shyly. At the same time, they were full of expectations for the future. Their previous situation was already desperate. Now that they could become stronger, they naturally wouldn't refuse. Moreover, they were not stupid. They knew that they had no room to refuse. Let's cultivate here. This place is between anti-Kunlun and Kunlun Origin Court. Only those who have mastered the inverse chaos divine ability can come here. Zhou Xuanji nodded upon hearing this. He couldn't help but wonder how many people in the world had learned the inverse chaos divine art. No matter what, he still had to be careful when he cultivated in the future. Subsequently, Little Sovereign taught the three of them the cultivation method. This technique was called the red dust reversal. It was created especially for Zhou Xuanji's situation. After Zhou Xuanji learned it, he opened his eyes and asked, "Who created the red dust inverse? Could it be that someone married a mortal god and entered Anti-Kunlun by mistake?" Little Sovereign revealed a sad smile and said, "In the past, I mistakenly entered the Anti-Kunlun mountains and met a mortal god. The world calls her ancestor Jade Disc. After so many years, I don't know if she's still alive." Female ancestor Jade Disc. Is she your wife? The red-clothed girl cried out in surprise, and her face was filled with disbelief. The woman in the palace dress sighed and said, "Female ancestor Jade Disc is the representative of the mortal deities. Who are you?" They were all interested in Little Sovereign. Little Sovereign said arrogantly, "I'm a sovereign. Is Jade Disc female ancestor not worthy of me?" The two girls were shocked, and their mouths were agape. Zhou Xuanji asked curiously, "Since you became the sovereign, why didn't you bring her along?" Little Sovereign shook his head and said, "Even if you are a sovereign, you can't enter the Anti-Kunlun at will. The Anti-Kunlun also has a sovereign." His tone was a little sorrowful. The world had changed, and the beauty of the past was probably gone. The red-robed girl said cautiously, "Matriarch UD seems to have." The woman glared at her, scaring her into silence. "I know that she might have already fallen. After so many years, I won't be sad. If she wants to blame someone, she can only blame herself for not leaving with me back then," Little Sovereign said faintly. These past events were in the depths of his memory, and he had thought about them countless times. Now that things had come to this point, he was at most oppressed. Zhou Xuanji did not interrupt, but he sighed in his heart. With such a comparison, he was filled with pride. He had always tried his best to protect the people he cared about and never let himself have any regrets. "All right, let's start cultivating." Then, he stored the Lesser Supreme sword into the Supreme storage. He also told Little Sovereign not to look at him. The two girls immediately blushed upon hearing this. They shyly sat cross-legged on both sides of Zhou Xuanji. Zhou Xuanji then said, "Close your eyes, take off your clothes, and start cultivating. Remember, don't open your eyes. I respect you, so you have to respect me too." The red-robed girl was infuriated. He said it as if they wanted to see him. However, she didn't dare to talk back since she was living under someone else's roof. Next, Zhou Xuanji took the lead in closing his eyes and began taking off his purple sky stardust robe. The two girls quickly closed their eyes and followed suit. After Zhou Xuanji took off his clothes, he waited for a few breaths before saying, "Let's cultivate together." The two girls were mortal gods. Their talent was naturally not bad. They quickly followed Zhou Xuanji and entered a state of cultivation. Even in this independent space, there was still the existence of Tao energy. At first, Zhou Xuanji didn't notice the existence of inverse chaos qi. But as the two girls entered a state of cultivation, he was pleasantly surprised to find inverse chaos qi around him. Even his Tao energy was skyrocketing. Tao energy and inverse chaos qi drilled into the two girls' bodies, overflowed through their pores, and poured into Zhou Xuanji's body. Faintly, Zhou Xuanji also felt another special gas. Mortal qi. His cultivation began to grow faster and faster. Zhou Xuanji was overjoyed and began to concentrate on cultivation. Time flew by quickly. In the blink of an eye, 5 years had passed. Zhou Xuanji's cultivation had skyrocketed. He began to break through from the peak of Tao ancestor to one vast heaven. The cultivation of the two mortal gods had also made great progress. They had already reached the Tao ancestor realm. The elder sister was a 7th-grade flower, and the younger sister was a 2nd-grade flower. In these 5 years, Zhou Xuanji didn't open his eyes. But the red-robed girl occasionally couldn't help but open her eyes. She didn't dare to look at Zhou Xuanji. 9 vast heavens. 9 vast heavens for the soul. The greatly divine suppressor technique had a way to break through to the 9 vast heavens. Previously, his realm wasn't high enough, but now that the time and cultivation were ripe, he could directly comprehend the way to break through when he operated this technique. This was a great divine ability. The same words had different effects for different cultivations. Between the anti-Kunlun and the Kunlun origin court, there was no need to undergo tribulation to break through. As his aura skyrocketed, the 2 mortal gods subconsciously opened their eyes and looked at him. Their faces instantly turned red, even their necks and ears. They quickly closed their eyes and began to communicate through voice transmission. Sister, he is so powerful. He broke through a major realm so quickly. Will the person favored by the sovereign be bad? Are we really going to follow him in the future? If we only support each other, can we survive? I don't want to. Don't worry, I will definitely protect you. Hee. When I become stronger, I will protect you too. And I feel that he is really a gentleman. He has never opened his eyes or humiliated us verbally. Let's wait and see. You can't be too narrow-minded when looking at a person. You have to look at him from many aspects. Zhou Xuanji didn't know the conversation between the 2 women. He was focused on breaking through. In the depths of his soul, a golden ocean appeared. It was bright and mysterious. In the golden ocean, there were countless swords of light floating in the air. They were all in the shape of his legendary swords. The vast heavens were condensed, and Tao energy manifested. Zhou Xuanji's Tao energy began to transform into a brand new force. Primordial energy, or primordial energy for short, was an existence higher than Tao energy. It could absorb Tao energy and spiritual qi to transform. He fell into a wonderful feeling. Even if he didn't open his eyes, he could see everything around him clearly. Of course, his eyes didn't stop on the 2 women. Instead, he was looking at anti-Kunlun and Kunlun origin court. He could see the miniature of the 2 planes, but he couldn't see them clearly. He began to clearly feel the existence of the 2 worlds. This perspective was like a god peeping into the mortal world. Chapter 776. Analyze that the sword owner has reached the first vast sky realm. Gotcha started. Ding. Congratulations, sword owner. You have obtained Myriad Life Fusion, Heavenly Fate Moon, Invincible Pill. The sword spirit's voice resounded in Zhou Xuanji's mind, interrupting his shock. While he was shocked by the magnificence of the 2 worlds, the sword spirit's voice was like a bell, waking him up from a dream. Another Omni-Fusion Divine Sword. And what was the Invincible Pill? Information about the fate of the moon appeared before his eyes. Sword name, Glorious Destiny Moon Level. Myriad Fusion Description. Contains the divine power of the legendary moon god ancestor. It can command fate and praise the heavens with its sword. To use this sword, one needs to be at least at the 2nd vast heavens realm. The threshold was only the 2nd vast heavens. The reversal divine sword was also a myriad life divine sword, but it required the cultivation of origin fusion divine Lord level 3. Zhou Xuanji felt quite confused. It seemed that there was a certain gap between the great destiny moon and the reverse legendary sword. He started to wonder what the invincible pill was again. A line of words appeared before his eyes. Invincible pill. After taking it, one could maintain an invincible state for the time it takes for an incense stick to burn. The invincible state meant that one could not be defeated. It did not include invincible strength. Invincible state? Zhou Xuanji blinked. This is an overlord physique? With this pill, he would have a higher chance of success when he reached the peak of anti-Kunlun. With that thought, he began to adjust the primordial power in his body to consolidate his cultivation. Another half a year passed. He decided to stop for a while, so he said, "Let's get dressed. Let's take a break." He took out the purple sky stardust robe and put it on. The sound of clothes being put on came from the side. 3 breaths later, the voice of the woman in the palace dress sounded. Done. Her voice was very soft, not as cold as before. Zhou Xuanji opened his eyes and took a deep breath. After painstakingly cultivating for 5 years, he had reached the 1 vast heavens realm, which made him feel refreshed. He had become stronger again. Once upon a time, he still had to look up to the one vast heavens. Congratulations on your breakthrough, the woman said with a charming smile on her face. The red-clothed girl was also very excited, but her pretty face was still flushed. Zhou Xuanji smiled and asked, "That's right, I still don't know your names." "My name is Shun Tang," the woman replied. "My name is Shun Yinxing." The girl in red giggled. These two names were quite pleasant to the ear. Zhou Xuanji smiled and said, "In the future, we will depend on each other. I will not mistreat you, nor will I restrict your wills." It had to be said that with two mortal gods by his side, it was equivalent to having two more cultivation plugins. Of course, the red dust in verse played a key role. "When are you leaving the Kunlun Origin Court?" Shun Tang asked curiously. Now that she had let down her guard, she behaved naturally and gracefully. Zhou Xuanji smiled and said, "When I'm powerful enough to reach where the sovereign is, I can leave this place." Supremacy. The two women's eyes were filled with splendor. They had no doubts because Zhou Xuanji's sword had a sovereign soul. Zhou Xuanji took out the lesser supreme sword and summoned Little Sovereign. "Yo, looks like you guys are having a good time." Little Sovereign winked and said with a smile. When he saw the two girls blushing and smiling, his thoughts went astray. Zhou Xuanji rolled his eyes at him and said, "Be more respectful. I have a wife and children. I won't mess around. Now that I have broken through to one vast heavens, are you still going to cultivate like this?" Little Sovereign looked at Zhou Xuanji, Shun Tang, and Shun Yinxing before nodding. "Let's continue. Their cultivation speed will get faster and faster until they truly awaken. It will be faster than massacring you." "Why not? It will be safer this way," Little Sovereign said with a smile. A look of anticipation appeared on his face. He felt more and more that Zhou Xuanji was likely to become the sovereign. Once he became the sovereign, he would be a super sovereign that would shake the world. Some sovereigns could make the Kunlun Origin Court peaceful and stable. Some sovereigns could bring turmoil to the Kunlun Origin Court. And some sovereigns could have great fortune, creating a new world and creating rules that bless the world. Even sovereigns were divided into high and low levels. Zhou Xuanji nodded. He then asked, "At this speed, when can I leave?" "Don't tell me I will become as powerful as the sovereign. Otherwise, I will have to wait forever." He wanted to go back as soon as possible. After all, the Kunlun Origin Court was in a dark period. Before he left, the evil Sky Divine Range was still in danger. Even if the Super Divine Ranges had a deep foundation, they wouldn't be able to afford it for a long time. Don't worry. As I said before, if you can break out of anti-Kunlun, you will have the hope to become the sovereign. If you break out and have the cultivation of the sovereign, what hope is there? Little Sovereign said, waving his hand. His expression was meaningful. Zhou Xuanji asked, "Then can you let me know?" Ever since he could see the miniature of the Kunlun Origin Court, his longing for it had begun to overflow. "You will know when the time comes. It won't be too long. Within 100 years, Little Sovereign said impatiently. Little Sovereign said impatiently. This kid cared too much about relationships. Shun Tang and Shun Yinxing glanced at each other before the two sisters began to chat via voice transmission. Naturally, they were talking about Zhou Xuanji. They could also hear that Zhou Xuanji really cared about his family. A man who valued affection could easily attract the attention of women. Not to mention that Zhou Xuanji's appearance and talent were top-notch. Next, Zhou Xuanji put away the lesser supreme sword and continued to cultivate with Shun Tang and Shun Yinxing. As always, look no further. Evil Sky Divine Range, Pure Sword Heaven, Jiang Shui, and Xian Xianghua were sitting in the stone pavilion, chatting while cultivating. Recently, the Evil Sky Divine Range has become more and more chaotic. It is said that it will be annexed by the Mortal Divine Range. I don't know if it's true, Jiang Shui sighed. Her eyes were filled with worry. Xian Xianghua opened her eyes and said, I hope not. After all, Zhou Xuanji has offended the Mortal Divine Range. She became angry at the mention of this matter. Back then, Beast Sovereign asked Zhou Xuanji to deal with the mortal divine range. Wasn't that digging a pit? Jiang Shui became even more worried after hearing this. After so many years, Zhou Xuanji still hadn't returned. No matter how much confidence she had in Zhou Xuanji, it would be obliterated. Zhou Shaoxian suddenly appeared beside her. She crossed her arms over her chest and snorted. Aunt Xian, can you control Tanhua? That kid is getting more and more arrogant. I asked him to spar with me, but he ignored me. When he was forced into a corner, he used the exterminating divine light. She was very angry. She couldn't move after being hit by the exterminating divine light. She was directly defeated. How can I fight like this? Jiang Shui rolled her eyes at her and angrily said, Why do you always like to mess with your brother? Are you jealous that his talent is better than yours? Zhou Shaoxian was immediately annoyed when she heard this. She snorted and said, Why would I be jealous of him? I just want to find someone to spar with. Recently, the evil sky divine range has been sealed. I can't even take a step out of pure sword heaven. Although her Kong Tong divine eyes had been awakened, she hadn't developed her original divine ability yet. Now, she felt that she couldn't beat Zhou Tanhua. So, she decided to compete with him. Unfortunately, that kid was too calm. No matter how she teased him, he was unwilling to compete with her seriously. Just as they were chatting, Delia, old man, flew over and said anxiously, This is bad. Chapter 777. Seeing Doya, old man's panicked look, Xian Xianhua rolled her eyes and said, What? What did you foresee? This guy always foretold a bad fate and came to disturb them every time. In the beginning, they were still surprised and flustered. But in the end, the danger that this guy foretold didn't appear. But he had the cheek to say that it wasn't because the time hadn't come yet. I foretold that the evil sky divine range would turn into ashes. The one who did it was a mysterious woman. Deoya, old man, said in a trembling voice as if he had just woken up from a nightmare. His whole body was covered in cold sweat. However, Xian Xianghua, Jiang Shui, and Zhou Shaoxian all rolled their eyes and ignored him. Seeing that they didn't care, Deoya, old man, became anxious and said, I have never foretold so clearly. This time it's definitely true. That woman is too strong. Beast Sovereign was directly beheaded by her. The three women couldn't help but look at each other when they saw that he was so serious. Zhou Shaoxian said angrily, Can you show the woman's face? Deoya, old man, nodded. He flipped his right hand as a mirror of light emerged from his palm. The beautiful face of a woman appeared in the mirror. Surprisingly, it was mortal god Shuntang. The corner of her mouth rose slightly. Her smile was very domineering. Her eyes were full of disdain. Coupled with her coquettish clothes, she had the temperament of an invincible monarch god. The three women frowned and looked at each other. Just by looking at this woman, they felt that she was very strong. Could it be that Deoya, old man, didn't slack this time and really foretold it? See, don't you think it's scary at first glance? Deoya, old man, swallowed and said nervously. He didn't dare to look at the woman's face. Jiang Shui, Zhou Shaoxian, and Xian Xianghua remembered this woman's appearance. If they really met her in the future, they had to avoid her. In the inverse chaos space, Zhou Xuanji, Shun Tang, and Shun Yinxing were still cultivating. No one had disturbed them. The two mortal gods provided him with a steady stream of inverse chaos qi and Tao energy, allowing his cultivation to grow. His current cultivation speed didn't slow down, nor did it slow down. On the contrary, it was increasing. But after so many years, he had already gotten used to it. His cultivation had already reached the three vast heavens realm. A few years ago, he had stepped into the one vast heavens realm, which showed how heaven-defying a mortal god was. It was already a great fortune to have one mortal god, and Zhou Xuanji had two. Since ancient times, the number of people who had this kind of opportunity could be counted on one's fingers, and they were all forgotten by history. Zhou Xuanji did not stop, but continued to cultivate. Shen Yinxing couldn't help but open her eyes again. She turned her gaze in another direction, her heart beating faster. She quietly glanced at Zhou Xuanji, cautiously. The cultivation state of the three was a little awkward. The two women were on Zhou Xuanji's left and right. They weren't far from each other. They could feel each other's temperature. Coupled with the fusion of inverse chaos qi, even if Zhou Xuanji's heart was as calm as water, the two women's hearts, which were like a pool of water, were already rippling. Don't look at indecent things, understand? Zhou Xuanji said, scaring Shun Yinxing so much that she quickly closed her eyes. Her face turned red. She muttered, "How do you know? Don't tell me you're using your spiritual will." As soon as these words came out, Shun Tang's pretty face quickly blushed, especially her ears, which were as red jade. "I'm not that despicable. I can feel other people's gazes," Zhou Xuanji replied calmly. If it was him 1,000 years ago, he might not be able to bear the restlessness in his heart. But after experiencing the vicissitudes of life, his heart was already as calm as still water. Shun Yinxing still wanted to ask, but Shun Tang interrupted her. "Cultivate well, don't make trouble." Shun Yinxing relied on Shun Tang the most. She immediately didn't dare to say anything. After all, this matter was really embarrassing for a woman. Zhou Xuanji didn't speak anymore and focused on cultivating. Another 20 years passed. His cultivation had reached the 5 vast heavens realm. Shun Yinxing really couldn't bear it anymore. She asked for a rest. Zhou Xuanji nodded and said, "Get dressed and open your eyes." He also wanted to talk to Little Sovereign. After a while, the three got dressed. Shun Yinxing stood up and stretched her body. A happy smile appeared on her face. Ever since she followed Zhou Xuanji, she was no longer afraid. All she needed to do was to cultivate well every day. This feeling brought her back to the experience of being the young miss of the divine range. Zhou Xuanji opened his eyes, took out the lesser supreme sword, and summoned Little Sovereign. Shun Tang sat next to him, silently looking at him, but her eyes were a little blurry. Which woman didn't yearn for love? Zhou Xuanji's temperament and character had made her fall in love with him. Unfortunately, Zhou Xuanji didn't pay attention to them at all. Little Sovereign appeared. He said impatiently, "How long have I slept? You summoned me again. I'm with 2 stunning women, and I'm naked. Aren't you happy? Or are you saying that your hobby is me?" Zhou Xuanji's forehead was full of black lines. He couldn't help but say, "Don't talk nonsense. Is it time for me to leave Anti-Kunlun?" Little Sovereign couldn't help but look at him, sizing him up. 5 vast heavens. Not bad. You barely reached this threshold, Little Sovereign said hesitantly. His eyes turned, and no one knew what he was thinking. Zhou Xuanji asked, "Can I leave now?" Little Sovereign hesitated for a moment before saying, "Okay, get ready to go. Fly to the peak of Anti-Kunlun." Zhou Xuanji was immediately overjoyed. He immediately got up. Shun Tang also got up. Little Sovereign looked at the 2 mortal gods and said with a smile, "Are you ready to follow him? Once you leave, you can't come back unless you die." Shun Tang nodded and said, "We have no other choice." Her gaze couldn't help but fall on Zhou Xuanji. Zhou Xuanji noticed the look in her eyes. He couldn't help but be surprised. Is this woman attracted by my elegance? Next, he left the inverse chaos space with the 2 mortal gods. After arriving at the Kunlun universe, Zhou Xuanji took out the Tri-Phoenix Qilin carriage and boarded it with the 2 girls. The 2 girls were stunned by the Tri-Phoenix Qilin carriage. After entering the carriage, they felt like they had entered a loft. The interior was gorgeous and antique. The Tri-Phoenix Qilin carriage flew upward at an extremely fast speed. Little Sovereign, hovering above the lesser supreme sword, said with a smile, "Don't be surprised when we reach the peak." Surprised? Zhou Xuanji raised his brow. He couldn't help but let his imagination run wild. Shun Tang and Shun Yinxing, sitting next to him, didn't say a word. They curiously watched the 2 chatting. Zhou Xuanji and Little Sovereign continued chatting. They were talking about the sovereigns. About 2 hours later, the Tri-Phoenix Qilin carriage still hadn't reached the peak. At this time, a murderous aura locked onto the Tri-Phoenix Qilin carriage. Zhou Xuanji's expression changed. He immediately appeared on the footboard outside the carriage with a sword in his hand. This sword was like a silver moon. It was 4 fingers wide and nearly 2 meters long. It was shining with a sparkling brilliance. Great Destiny Moon, Zhou Xuanji stared ahead and saw Beast Sovereign looking at him with a murderous aura. Brat, you finally showed up. You dare to lie to me. You will die today, Beast Sovereign said in a cold voice as he walked toward Zhou Xuanji. If the 2 mortal gods weren't in the carriage, he would have already attacked. Chapter 778. Zhou Xuanji didn't panic in the slightest in the face of Beast Sovereign. He was no longer the same as before. His cultivation had reached the 5 vast heavens realm, and he had the universal life fusion divine sword in his hand. He wanted to test his strength. He mobilized the divine energy in the great Destiny Moon and slashed at Beast Sovereign. Sword chi came from all directions, trying to drown Beast Sovereign. Beast Sovereign's expression changed slightly. He immediately punched, scattering the sword chi. Before he could make his next move, Zhou Xuanji had already arrived in front of him. The great Destiny Moon slashed horizontally, aiming at Beast Sovereign's neck. So fast, Beast Sovereign was shocked. How long has it been? This kid has already transformed to such a level. Wait, 5 vast heavens. How is this possible? Beast Sovereign was shocked while dodging. Monstrous waves were set off in his heart. What the hell has this kid experienced? Could it be that he and the 2 mortal gods have already... Beast Sovereign flew into a rage. He felt insulted. With a loud roar, his aura erupted, shaking the universe. Zhou Xuanji cast the sword fusion technique. Thousands of divine swords merged into his body as a layer of dazzling silver light burst out of his body. It was extremely magical. He raised the great Destiny Moon and cast the primordial chaos sword shadow. Billions of sword shadows appeared out of thin air, occupying the space and sealing them off. The tips of the swords pointed straight at Beast Sovereign. The blades vibrated with great momentum. Shun Tang and Shen Yinxing in the carriage were very excited. They didn't expect Zhou Xuanji to be so strong that he dared to challenge Beast Sovereign head-on. One should know that he was only at the 5 vast heavens realm. In the super divine range, the cultivation of the 5 vast heavens realm was nothing. Zhou Xuanji's primordial chaos sword shadow was no longer what it used to be. Every sword was very strong. They moved together like the shrinking universe, crushing everything. Beast Sovereign raised his arms and cast a black light shield to resist the violent attack of the primordial chaos sword shadow. He gritted his teeth as his arms trembled slightly. Zhou Xuanji's divine swords had many powerful existences. After merging with his body, his strength had surpassed the 9 vast heavens realm and was comparable to the Origin Fusion Divine Lord. At this moment, Zhou Xuanji could also judge the rank of his strength. Beast Sovereign seemed to be seriously injured. He was far from being as strong as he was when he fought with the mortal divine range. However, he wasn't an ordinary Origin Fusion Divine Lord. The corner of Zhou Xuanji's mouth rose as he squeezed out the soul source orb from his glabella. He immediately used the suppressing the universe, causing Beast Sovereign's speed to instantly slow down. Beast Sovereign didn't panic. Black lightning overflowed from his eyes and rapidly expanded, covering the entire space like countless black dragons. Zhou Xuanji used the Emperor's Way 1,000-hand sword Buddha as a 1,000,000 feet tall golden Buddha appeared. Thousands of arms stretched out, each holding a sword as they madly hacked at Beast Sovereign. Boom! 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 The Tri-Phoenix Qilin carriage activated its defensive array to resist these attacks. Meanwhile, Zhou Xuanji continued to cast all kinds of Sword Dao divine abilities, completely suppressing Beast Sovereign. Beast Sovereign was furious. He couldn't even beat this junior. He was very aggrieved, but there was nothing he could do. The disappearance of the 2 mortal gods had caused the mortal divine range to go berserk, almost destroying the evil sky divine range. He was also seriously injured. No, we can't go on like this. Beast Sovereign gritted his teeth. His robe suddenly swelled, and a burst of gray mist suddenly burst out, sweeping across the entire universe. Zhou Xuanji used all kinds of divine abilities at his fingertips, wave after wave. He didn't give Beast Sovereign a chance to catch his breath. At this moment, he seemed to be above Beast Sovereign. He was standing on the head of the thousand-hand sword Buddha, looking down at Beast Sovereign. Shen Tang and Shen Yinxing in the carriage were dazzled. Such a Zhou Xuanji was the most attractive to women. What's more, Zhou Xuanji had saved them from a desperate situation. Sister, he is so powerful. He might really become a sovereign in the future, Shen Yinxing said with a look of admiration. Shen Yinxing said with a look of worship and a calm expression. Shen Tang nodded and said with a smile, definitely. He has a certain temperament that makes people feel that he will reach the top sooner or later. Upon hearing this, Shen Yinxing looked at her in surprise and asked, Sister, don't tell me you have fallen in love with him? Hearing this, Shen Tang blushed and glared at her. Shen Yinxing rolled her eyes. She finally understood what was going on. Recalling what Little Sovereign had said before, she blushed. Two sisters serving the same husband. Outside, Zhou Xuanji and Beast Sovereign were still fighting fiercely. Beast Sovereign fell into a more and more decline. He was shocked to find that Zhou Xuanji was absorbing his power. World internalization. He didn't understand. This was the first time his cultivation was being absorbed by a junior whose cultivation was far weaker than his. This feeling made him feel like he was about to collapse. You will lose. Why don't you leave now? Zhou Xuanji said condescendingly. He deliberately provoked Beast Sovereign. He didn't want to waste any more time. After all, their battle was huge. If they continued to fight, it would definitely attract many powerful cultivators. At that time, he would be in big trouble. Beast Sovereign's expression changed. He suddenly turned around and fled. Zhou Xuanji pretended to chase after him. This shocked Beast Sovereign so much that he quickly tore the space open and fled. The thousand-hand sword Buddha shattered, turning into golden light that filled the sky. Zhou Xuanji teleported into the carriage of the Tri-Phoenix Qilin carriage. The Tri-Phoenix Qilin carriage followed him and flew up at an extremely fast speed. After Beast Sovereign was defeated, no one came to stop them. After another hour, they came to a cosmic space filled with purple qi. There was no trace of the divine range here. Zhou Xuanji scanned the surroundings with his divine will. He was very curious. He didn't expect that there would be such a space above the divine range. The Tao energy here was extremely abundant. There was also a lot of spiritual qi surging. It was very high level. It was even more powerful than the spiritual qi in pure sword heaven. We will soon reach the apex of Anti-Kunlun. Get ready, Little Sovereign said with a smile. A look of anticipation appeared on his face. When he went to the apex of Anti-Kunlun, he was also uneasy. But now, he was only curious. Zhou Xuanji was very puzzled by his expression. Isn't this guy worried? If he is killed by the Sovereign, Little Sovereign won't survive either. Could it be that there is no danger ahead? Zhou Xuanji fell into deep thought while Shen Tang and Shen Yinxing whispered to each other. After flying for a while, suddenly, the carriage shook violently. A mysterious force directly moved them out of the carriage. Zhou Xuanji opened his eyes again and found himself standing above the sea of clouds. What's going on? Shen Yinxing asked nervously. Her voice was very low for fear of disturbing the Sovereign. Zhou Xuanji took a deep breath and stored the Tri-Phoenix Qilin carriage into the Supreme storage. He then walked forward with the Lesser Supreme sword in hand. Shen Tang and Shen Yinxing followed him, vigilantly watching the surroundings. The sea of clouds was layered and the sky was filled with a dazzling glow. As the three strolled forward, Little Sovereign suddenly flew out of the sword and said with a smile, "Don't worry, let's go boldly." Although Zhou Xuanji was puzzled by this, he still quickened his pace. The two women followed closely behind. They didn't dare to lose track of him. After the time it takes for half an incense stick to burn, they saw a wooden house in front of them. Its back was filled with a dazzling glow. The scene was as beautiful as a painting. This wooden house looked simple and unremarkable, but it exuded a vast aura. Zhou Xuanji furrowed his brow. For some reason, he felt that this wooden house was a little familiar. Could it be? As if he had guessed something, his pupils shrank. Impossible. Chapter 779. Seeing Zhou Xuanji's expression change, Shen Tang couldn't help but ask, "What's wrong?" Shen Yinqing couldn't help but look back at him. "Nothing, I just guessed a possibility." "Let's move on," Zhou Xuanji said, shaking his head. Zhou Xuanji said as he shook his head. Little Sovereign snickered on the side, looking a bit treacherous. They walked up to the wooden house. This wooden house wasn't big. There was probably only one room inside. There was a garden in front of the door. There were no trees, only some flowers and plants. There was no wind, but they swayed slightly. Zhou Xuanji looked at the wooden door, a little hesitant. "Hey, Sovereign, don't you want to come out and meet me?" Little Sovereign asked casually. Hearing this, Shen Tang and Shen Yinqing glanced at each other. They were very puzzled. Does Little Sovereign know the current sovereign? They were so nervous that they didn't dare to speak. After all, the sovereign was living inside. Crack! The wooden door suddenly opened. It was pitch black inside. They couldn't see anything. A figure slowly walked out. Shen Tang and Shen Yinqing's eyes widened in disbelief. "You!" Shen Yinqing almost cried out in alarm. She quickly covered her mouth before looking at Zhou Xuanji and then at the sovereign. This sovereign was none other than Zhou Xuanji. He was wearing a pure black robe. His hair was naturally loose, and there was a smile on his face. His eyes were deep, as if he had seen through all the true meaning of the world. Zhou Xuanji wasn't shocked, but there was a complicated look in his eyes. Jizun also looked at him, carefully sizing him up, revealing a satisfied expression. Little Sovereign clicked his tongue in amazement and said, "I guessed it would be like this." Sure enough. Zhou Xuanji looked at him and asked, "What do you mean? How did you guess this?" Little Sovereign smiled and said, "I was like this back then. I came here nervously only to find that the sovereign was me. Later, I understood that everything has its own cause and effect. At every stage, those who are qualified to break out of anti-Kunlun are all sovereigns. This involves time and cause and effect. It's hard to understand." Zhou Xuanji was still confused. He didn't understand the true meaning. Shen Tang and Shen Yinqing were still in a state of shock. The Supreme Being smiled and said, "To put it bluntly, if it weren't for the Supreme Being's reverse body, those who come here from another plane won't be able to live long. Every Supreme Being will encounter their own reverse body. This is a test for you, and for us too." With a wave of his right hand, a rocking chair appeared behind him. He sat down and began to rock like an old man. He leisurely said, "The Kunlun origin court and anti-Kunlun have been a mystery since ancient times. Speaking of which, it is most likely to be related to the mortal god. Only the mortal god is unique in these two planes." Little Sovereign nodded and said with a smile, "If his two mortal gods can survive, they might be strong enough to dominate the two realms." As soon as he said this, Zhou Xuanji couldn't help but look at Shen Tang and Shen Yinqing. It seemed that the red-clothed bald girl he met at that time was not Shen Yinqing. Why was the mortal divine energy unique? Could it be that the rules of the two realms were created by the mortal god? Zhou Xuanji did not think further and asked, "Then can you let me go?" The most important thing now was to get out of here as soon as possible. The rules of the two realms had nothing to do with him. He could not understand it. If he wanted to understand it, he would have to reach the level of a supreme being. Jizun glanced at him and smiled mysteriously. "If you want to leave, you have to rely on yourself, not me." Little Sovereign also smiled. Zhou Xuanji felt that the smiles of the two were very treacherous in his eyes. Zhou Xuanji asked, "How can I leave?" The Sovereign shook his head. His body swayed as he said with a smile, "No hurry. I want to ask you, how do you feel after coming here? How is it compared to anti-Kunlun?" The creatures of the two Kunlun origin court all thought that the other was anti-Kunlun. From the ordinary creatures to the sovereign. Zhou Xuanji replied, "There's no life here. It's like hell." Shen Tang and Shen Yinqing nodded. Ever since they were young, they rarely left the mortal divine range because the elders said that it was too dangerous outside and restricted the actions of the younger generation. Do you know why it's like this? The sovereign asked with a smile, making Zhou Xuanji feel like he was looking in a mirror. Zhou Xuanji had already met two people who looked exactly like him. It made him feel very awkward. Zhou Xuanji raised his brow and asked, I should ask you this question, right? The sovereign wasn't just the strongest. He had to have his own responsibilities. Your anti-Kunlun should have a dark period. Our Kunlun origin court has just experienced it. If I hadn't appeared out of nowhere, dominated the sovereign list, and suppressed all the divine ranges, the Kunlun origin court would have been more like hell than it is now, the sovereign said with a smile. His smile was a little proud. Zhou Xuanji sighed and said, Since you and I are the same, you should understand how I feel right now, right? The sovereign nodded as his smile began to fade. Zhou Xuanji keenly caught it. He immediately asked, Do you have a family? The sovereign, expressionless, replied, No, the path to becoming the strongest is lonely. Only by being alone can one have no distractions. Zhou Xuanji's heart sank. After coming to the anti-Kunlun, he had imagined many scenes of reuniting with his family. But he didn't expect it to be like this. They're already dead. Looking at the calm sovereign, he inexplicably felt that he was looking at a dead person. The two fell into silence. Shen Yinxing looked at them in confusion. She didn't know what they were thinking. Shun Tang seemed to be thinking of something. She looked at Zhou Xuanji with pity in her eyes. Okay, just say it. Little Sovereign broke the silence and said with a meaningful smile. Little Sovereign broke the silence with a meaningful smile. He looked at Zhou Xuanji with eyes full of expectation. Zhou Xuanji looked at him and asked of his eyes. It's very simple. You just have to prove to the sovereign your strength and will to become the sovereign. As long as you pass, he will open the passage between the two worlds. To enter the passage between the two worlds, you need at least the strength of Origin Fusion Divine Lord. Plus, you need the inverse Chaos Divine ability to stabilize the passage between the two worlds, Little Sovereign explained. Little Sovereign introduced, his eyes fixed on Zhou Xuanji. At this point, Brat, don't let me down. Zhou Xuanji looked at the Sovereign and asked, Is that so? The Sovereign nodded and said with a smile, I will sit here. If you can make me stand up, I will consider it your victory. With a wave of his right hand, Shun Tang and Shen Yinxing immediately moved 100 feet away. A circle of light appeared out of thin air, isolating them. Zhou Xuanji directly used the sword fusion technique. He held the Lesser Supreme Sword in his left hand and the Great Destiny Moon in his right. With the two swords in hand, his aura erupted, shaking the sea of clouds. The Sovereign raised his brow and said with a smile, Sword fusion technique, not bad. It seems that you have a lot of swords, and each and every one of them is extraordinary. Zhou Xuanji's eyes turned cold. He immediately used the primordial chaos sword shadow. Billions of swords appeared above him out of thin air, violently rushing towards the Sovereign. As soon as these sword shadows touched the Sovereign and the wooden house, they disappeared into thin air, turning into smoke. Zhou Xuanji arrived in front of the Sovereign in a single step. He raised his sword and slashed at the Sovereign. With a loud bang, he was directly bounced back by an invisible force. It seems that your cultivation is not enough, the Sovereign said with a smile. Ji Zun laughed, his expression somewhat contemptuous. Chapter 780. Zhou Xuanji was not enraged by the Sovereign's provocation, but became even more focused. He used all kinds of divine abilities and attacked Ji Zun crazily. He even used the exterminating divine eyes. But the Sovereign remained motionless on the rocking chair with a smile on his face. None of Zhou Xuanji's attacks could touch him. Not enough power. Move faster. This sword has to follow a certain trajectory when swinging it. It has to move with the wind. Your exterminating divine eyes have to be used at any time, not after a pause. You're too weak. What qualifications do you have to become a supreme being? The Sovereign's words pierced Zhou Xuanji's heart, but they did not disturb Zhou Xuanji's heart. Instead, He closed his eyes and devoted himself to the battle. The soul source orb between his eyebrows rotated constantly, like an eyeball. Little Sovereign was attached to the lesser supreme sword. His soul was behind Zhou Xuanji. He noticed Zhou Xuanji's expression and immediately began to preach. Jizun couldn't help but raise her eyebrows. Hearing the Tao preaching, Zhou Xuanji's attacks did not slow down, but instead became faster. His strength was also gradually increasing. From a perspective of Shun Tang and Shun Yinxing, it seemed as if countless Zhou Xuanji were besieging the sovereign. Jizun, who was in the sword chi storm, still maintained a smile, as if she was in another world. Zhou Xuanji, on the other hand, entered a wondrous state of enlightenment. After a while, the situation had changed. Every time Zhou Xuanji tried to break through to the sovereign realm, the invisible barrier would ripple. At first glance, the sovereign seemed to be in a ball of water. Jizun's eyes lit up, and she began to size up the surrounding attacks. Inverse Chaos Divine Ability. This kid's control over the Inverse Chaos Divine art had reached such a deep level. In order to resist the sovereign's invisible defense, Zhou Xuanji was also using the Inverse Chaos Divine Ability while attacking, using the sovereign's rules to deal with the sovereign. Under such attacks, Zhou Xuanji's sword was getting closer and closer to the sovereign. Interesting. The corners of Jizun's mouth curled up as she smiled in satisfaction. As expected of his reverse body, his comprehension ability was indeed very strong. Shun Tang and Shun Yinxing also noticed this scene. "Sister, he's amazing," Shun Yinxing said with a face full of admiration. The opponent was a supreme being. If it was her, she wouldn't even dare to make a move against a Jizun. Shun Tang nodded and said softly, "Be quiet. Don't disturb him." Shun Yinxing couldn't help but turn her head to look at her. She said meaningfully, "Sister, are you starting to turn away?" Shun Tang glared at her when she heard this, but she didn't retort. She felt rather sweet in her heart. The battle continued. Zhou Xuanji's sword kept approaching the sovereign. At this rate, he would encounter the sovereign after a while. If the sovereign didn't want to get hurt, he had to avoid him. At that time, Zhou Xuanji would pass the test. However, Zhou Xuanji did not let his guard down. He was still in a state of enlightenment. His state of epiphany was very advanced. His consciousness could still focus on the battle, but his body was instinctively in the state of epiphany. Jizun's eyes turned cold. She suddenly raised her right hand and waved it casually. Puff! Zhou Xuanji immediately vomited blood and flew backward. He didn't even come into contact with the sovereign. Little Sovereign became angry and said, "What do you want to do?" Zhou Xuanji quickly steadied himself. He wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and slowly opened his eyes. Jizun looked at him from afar and smiled. "You have passed the test." He passed. Zhou Xuanji was stunned. Shun Tang and Shun Yinxing were also stunned. In their opinion, this test should be very difficult. How could he pass so easily? How long did this battle last? Only the time it takes for an incense stick to burn? Little Sovereign was also stunned. He furrowed his brow and asked, "Don't joke with me." The sovereign smiled and said, "It's that simple. He is qualified to be the sovereign. Do I have to go all out? If that's the case, who can pass this test?" Zhou Xuanji appeared in front of him and asked, "Can I go back now?" The sovereign looked at him and locked eyes with him. Facing the sovereign's eyes, Zhou Xuanji was inexplicably in a trance. "Are you ready to go back? Once you go, you will never come back," the sovereign asked seriously. His tone was full of deep meaning. Zhou Xuanji nodded and said, "I don't want to come back either." In the distance, Shun Tang and Shun Yinxing were a little nervous. They also wanted to leave with Zhou Xuanji, especially Shun Tang. You can only go back by yourself. You can't take the two mortal gods with you. They have their own destiny. It has nothing to do with you for the time being. But they are closely connected to you in the future, the sovereign said with deep meaning. Zhou Xuanji furrowed his brow. He had already promised the sisters that he would take them away. At this point, how could he go back on his word? He asked, "How can I take them away?" The sovereign stared at him. His eyes turned sharp as he said, "If you take them with you, something bad might happen. Even as the sovereign, you can't see through the mortal gods. Not to mention that both of them are mortal gods. With two mortal rules together, their future is limitless." Zhou Xuanji remained unmoved by his words. Promises were very important. As for the price, he didn't want to think about it. "I must take them with me," Zhou Xuanji said firmly. Shen Tang and Shen Yinxing were very moved by his words. The sovereign waved his right hand, and the two women flew to Zhou Xuanji's side. He stared at the two women and asked seriously, "Are you ready? Your future will not be peaceful. Your potential is unimaginable." Shen Tang took a deep breath and said, "We want to leave this place." They were heartbroken by Anti-Kunlun. They didn't want to stay here anymore. "Then, what will you do to him in the future?" the sovereign asked. His eyes were full of oppression. Shen Tang replied without thinking, "He saved my life and gave me a new lease on life. I will always follow him and serve him. I will never abandon him." Shen Yinxing didn't speak. She was very nervous. She was afraid that the sovereign wouldn't allow them to leave. "Remember what you said. Promises are always harder to carry out than to make," the sovereign said meaningfully. He raised his right hand as a halo of light appeared beside him. It quickly grew until it reached 6 feet in diameter. It was filled with golden light, making it impossible to see anything. He continued, "This is the passage between the two worlds. If you want to cross it, you will encounter various rules. You can't hide in artifacts. You must cross it in person. Otherwise, the rules of the other Kunlun Origin Court will reject you and directly obliterate you." Zhou Xuanji turned his head and couldn't help but take a deep breath. He had been waiting for this day for a long time. Little Sovereign looked at the sovereign and asked, "Did you divine something?" As soon as he said this, Zhou Xuanji and the other two turned their attention back to the sovereign. The sovereign shook his head with a smile. He didn't say anything. Zhou Xuanji also didn't ask. Instead, he led the two women to the golden halo. "Hey, how are your wives and children?" The sovereign couldn't help but ask. His tone was a bit complicated. Zhou Xuanji didn't look back and replied softly, "I don't know, but I will protect them." After saying this, he stepped into the passage between the two worlds without hesitation. Shen Tang and Shen Yinxing followed closely behind. The sovereign showed a strange smile and murmured, "Mortal gods, who is the one behind this?" Chapter 781. After entering the passageway between the two worlds, Zhou Xuanji looked around. There was light all around him, and he could only see things within a 10-meter radius. He looked back at Shen Tang and Shen Yinxing and said, "Follow me closely, don't lose me." The sisters nodded, not daring to let their guard down. The three of them flew forward. Shen Yinxing looked back and could no longer see the entrance. Little Sovereign reminded, "If you get lost here, it will be very difficult for you to find your way back. No one knows what will happen to you." Hearing this, the two girls became even more nervous. They stuck close to Zhou Xuanji, afraid that they might lose him. "How long will it take to fly out?" asked Zhou Xuanji. With the Lesser Supreme sword and Great Destiny Moon in his hand, he glanced around. Ever since he entered the passageway between the two worlds, his hair stood on end. There was a feeling of being spied on by countless enemies, but he didn't show it. Instead, he pretended to be calm to reassure Shen Tang and Shen Yinxing. "I'm not sure. Time has no meaning here. Back then, I didn't even know how long I had to fly to get out. This is a test of willpower." Little Sovereign replied in a somewhat emotional tone. Time passed quickly. Before meeting Zhou Xuanji, he swore that he would never come to the passageway between the two worlds again. Whatever he was afraid of came. Shen Tang asked, "Time is meaningless. If we don't fly out at the same time, won't we end up in different timelines?" Little Sovereign glanced at her and praised, "You're right. So in the end, you must follow him closely. If you're a step slower, there may be unpredictable results." Shen Tang nodded. Her eyes were filled with apprehension. Shen Yinxing was the most nervous. She held her sister's arm tightly in her arms and kept looking around. There was light in all directions, and he still couldn't see anything. For the rest of the journey, they moved forward in silence, no longer speaking. Days passed by. They never stopped. If it was just flying, it would not consume too much of their primordial power or Tao power. Gradually, they became numb and lost track of time. Unknowingly, Zhou Xuanji began to feel sleepy. He became absent-minded, and his eyes lost their spirit. "What are you doing?" Little Sovereign suddenly shouted, causing him to tremble and instantly sober up. Not only him, but even Shun Tang and Shun Yinxing were also shocked. They almost fainted just now. "What happened?" Zhou Xuanji muttered to himself with a frown. Cold sweat broke out on his forehead. Little Sovereign sighed and said, "Hold on. Don't forget, you have the inverse chaos divine ability." Zhou Xuanji immediately activated the inverse chaos divine ability, enveloping him, Shun Tang, and Shun Yinxing. In an instant, they felt their bodies relax, as if an invisible shackle had been expelled. Shun Yinxing patted her chest and said with fear, "Was it some kind of restriction just now?" Little Sovereign shook his head and said, "It's not a restriction, but an extremely high-level law. Even I don't know the origin of this law. A law that even a supremacy couldn't see through." The sisters looked at each other and saw the shock in each other's eyes. In their hearts, the Supremes were the strongest. They were omnipotent and omniscient. How strong were the rules that the Supremes were unable to see through? Just thinking about it sent shivers down his spine. "Be careful," Zhou Xuanji spoke suddenly, and the sisters turned around in shock. A silhouette appeared in front of them. It was like a shadow, and it was impossible to see its face clearly. He held his sword and did not move, as though he was waiting for Zhou Xuanji and the others to fly over. Zhou Xuanji didn't stop. Instead, he used the exterminating divine light. Two beams of exterminating divine light shot out from his eyes, directly penetrating the black shadow. The black shadow dissipated like a cloud of smoke, no longer existing. The three quickly flew past the place where the black shadow was. They didn't encounter any attack. "What happened? What was that just now?" Shun Yinxing asked nervously. Her voice was trembling. The black shadow just now made her hair stand on end. She could feel a chill running down her spine. Time remnant. Since ancient times, many creatures have been lost in time. There are many powerful cultivators among them. Their will never die. They have become remnant existences in this chaos of time. Some are extremely aggressive, while some are just phantoms that pass through. Little Sovereign introduced in a solemn tone. Little Sovereign introduced with a solemn tone. It wasn't a good thing to encounter the time remnant so early. However, he didn't say it out loud, lest Zhou Xuanji and the others panicked. Their current state was very good. As long as they maintained it, they would be able to get through safely. But I'm afraid Zhou Xuanji expanded the inverse chaos divine ability to cover a radius of 10 feet. The existence of the time remnant cast a shadow over the hearts of the three. They became even more vigilant. Later on, the time remnant continued to appear. Occasionally, some of the time remnant would take the initiative to attack them. In Little Sovereign's words, these time remnant had already integrated with the space rule and became a space-time remnant. Once they killed them, their souls would be devoured by them and become a part of their strength. The passage between the two worlds seemed to be endless. Boredom and confusion would obliterate all emotions. The tension and fear of Zhou Xuanji and the others were also obliterated. God knows how long had passed. Maybe it had been a month. Maybe it had been decades. Time was meaningless. Even the sword spirit didn't remind him of his birthday. This situation was very similar to how fate had knocked him down to earth. Hold on. Could it be that fate sent me into the passage between the two worlds? But instead of falling into Anti-Kunlun, I ended up on Earth thousands of years later? Thinking of this, Zhou Xuanji suddenly became spirited. He didn't notice that the distance between him and Shun Tang and Shun Yinxing was growing. They were already 2 feet away from each other, which was equivalent to more than 6 meters. The two women seemed very tired. Their eyes were hollow. They didn't even have the strength to speak. Shun Tang supported Shun Yinxing, but her hands were trembling. They can't hold on any longer. Little Sovereign suddenly flew out of the sword and reminded him. Zhou Xuanji looked back and found that he had already shaken off the two women. He immediately slowed down and waited for the two women to come to his side before asking, "Are you okay?" Shun Tang wanted to say something, but she couldn't say a single word because she looked like she was going to muddle through at any moment. This is why you have to learn the inverse chaos divine ability. Without the inverse chaos divine ability, you'll end up like them and die sooner or later. Little Sovereign sighed, making Zhou Xuanji frown. He said in a deep voice, "Why didn't you say so earlier?" Little Sovereign's face was expressionless as he said, "Their existence will help you be more confident. If they die, you can absorb their worldly aura to strengthen yourself. You can even become half a mortal god." Shun Tang and Shun Yinxing were not angry. They no longer had the strength and spirit to resent him. At this moment, they had already fallen into a state of reminiscence. It was like a person recalling his past life before he died. Zhou Xuanji took out two holy light redemption swords and stabbed them into the two women's legs. "Since they're here, I want them to follow me out alive," Zhou Xuanji said with a cold voice. Chapter 782. Get out of here alive? Little Sovereign sneered. "How could it be that easy?" he said faintly. "Since ancient times, the chances of survival through the passage between the two worlds are very slim, let alone carrying two people. Brat, you have to understand one thing. If you want to become a supreme being, you have to abandon everything and let your heart be free of worries. The strongest is also the loneliest existence. Do you see your reverse body? He lives alone in that wooden hut. He has nothing to worry about and can completely focus on his cultivation." Zhou Xuanji was not moved by his words. Turning around was just turning around. It did not mean that Zhou Xuanji could do the same. Since it was a reversal, then Zhou Xuanji should live a completely different life. Under the healing of the Holy Light Redemption Sword, the two women began to recover. After a while, Shun Tang said gratefully in a weak voice, "Thank you for not giving up on us." Shun Yinxing stared angrily at Little Sovereign. She had always respected Little Sovereign. She didn't expect that Little Sovereign would use them as chess pieces. Zhou Xuanji said seriously, "Don't stay too far away from me. I can use the inverse chaos divine ability to protect you." Without Shun Tang and Shun Yinxing, how could he have reached the fifth vast heavens so early? He didn't want to break his promise unless the other party betrayed him. The two women nodded and quickly moved behind him. Shun Yinxing also reached out and grabbed the corner of his clothes. Little Sovereign shook his head and didn't say anything. The three of them continued forward. The boredom and torment of the passage between the two worlds were far beyond their imagination. Even Zhou Xuanji suspected that there was no end. The atmosphere became silent. Another long time passed. The passageway between the two worlds started to change, and a starry sky appeared in front of them. When they flew into it, they felt like they were traveling through the vast universe. The scenery changed, and so did their emotions. "What's going on?" Zhou Xuanji summoned Little Sovereign and asked. Little Supreme glanced around and said, "This means that you have left Anti-Kunlun, but you are still far from the Kunlun origin court. You are still in the channel between the two worlds." Zhou Xuanji frowned. There was a vast space between the two Kunlun origin courts? Then what is this space? Could it be that this was the motivation for the supreme beings to keep cultivating? After coming to this starry sky, the pressure on Zhou Xuanji and the others lessened significantly. The familiar environment made them feel much more at ease. However, the rest of the journey was still boring. Kunlun Origin Court. Xiao, Xiao. Two air-piercing sounds rang out in the universe. Two people were chasing each other. The person chasing after him was Old Demon Soul Mover. The person in front was Chu Machin, a 17-star genius who was once in the same realm as Zhou Xuanji. He gritted his teeth and pushed his speed to the limit, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't shake off old demon soul mover. Damn it, what is this guy trying to do? He can obviously catch up to me, but he keeps maintaining a distance. Could it be that he wants to force me out of the Kunlun origin court? Chumachin frowned and thought in horror. No matter what, he could only rely on himself now. What should I do? As Chumachin flew at full speed, he swept his gaze forward, trying to find a place to escape. The creatures they encountered along the way were almost scared out of their wits when they saw old demon soul mover. They didn't even have time to hide and didn't dare to support Chumachin. The Kunlun origin court had completely entered a dark period. Most creatures already knew that the Supremes had disappeared, so the various divine ranges began to fight. Lone geniuses like Chumachin would be hunted down. The Supreme ranking was still there, and the origin court tacitly allowed this kind of killing, hoping to select the Supreme in this chaotic world. Kid, where do you think you're going? Old demon Soul Mover grinned with a playful look on his face. Suddenly, a soul mountain appeared behind him. Countless wronged souls began to struggle and roar silently. Chumachin's divine sense had been paying attention to old demon Soul Mover. When he saw the soul mountain, he was so scared that his scalp almost exploded. It's over. This time, it's completely over. Chumachin was disheartened and desperate. He didn't want to become a pitiful creature on the soul mountain. Instead of enduring the endless torment, it was better to die. He gritted his teeth and prepared to detonate his soul. At this moment, a red figure appeared in front of him out of thin air. Looking at the figure, it was obviously a woman. She had a graceful figure and was surrounded by red gas. He couldn't see through her. Chumachin's eyes widened, and he subconsciously wanted to go around her. The other party suddenly raised her right hand and pointed at him. Chumachin only felt a terrifying force hit him, and his soul was directly knocked out of his body. Old demon Soul Mover, who was behind him, widened his eyes and quickly stopped with a look of horror. The red figure raised her hand and sucked Chumachin's soul and body into her palm. She then rushed toward old demon Soul Mover, leaving behind countless afterimages like illusions. Old demon Soul Mover was just about to dodge when the red figure arrived 10 feet away. She slapped old demon Soul Mover's soul out of his body. With a wave of her left hand, old demon Soul Mover's body, soul, and Soul Mountain were all taken away. After doing all this, the red figure disappeared into thin air, as if she had never been there. Inside the passage between the two worlds, the vast starry sky above their heads. Zhou Xuanji's group of 3 was still moving forward. Little Sovereign came out and looked ahead. He muttered, "From the looks of it, the first tribulation is coming." The first tribulation? Zhou Xuanji's group of 3 was a little sleepy, but his words scared them to death. What tribulation? Shen Yinxing asked nervously. She carefully looked ahead. Zhou Xuanji was also very vigilant. Little Sovereign leisurely replied, "The first tribulation is the tribulation of cultivation. There are all kinds of heavenly tribulations. Let's leave it to fate." Leave it to fate? This kind of thing can be left to fate. Even Zhou Xuanji couldn't bear it anymore. He sneered and said, "Is that so? Be careful, or I will throw the Lesser Supreme sword down." When Little Sovereign heard this, his expression changed greatly. He quickly shouted, "Don't panic. I have an idea." Zhou Xuanji snorted coldly and waited for him to continue. "I just need to use the inverse chaos divine ability to send the heavenly tribulation back." Little Sovereign said helplessly with a sullen expression. Shen Tang and Shen Yinxing couldn't help but laugh, feeling very relieved. They had long disliked Little Sovereign. This guy always looked like it was easy for him to talk, and he would always make fun of them. Right at this moment, a horrifying gale blew from the side, and even someone as powerful as Zhou Xuanji was almost flipped over. Shen Tang and Shen Yinxing couldn't bear it and were directly blown away. In the blink of an eye, Zhou Xuanji quickly put down his sword and stretched out his hands to grab the two women's hands, pulling them into his embrace. This movement caused Zhou Xuanji to instantly lose his balance, and he was swept away by the wild gale. "Brat!" Little Sovereign was shocked. He quickly controlled the Lesser Supreme Sword and Great Destiny Moon to fall on Zhou Xuanji's group of 3. This gust of wind came and went quickly. Zhou Xuanji's group of 3 stabilized themselves. Shen Tang cried out in horror, "What is this?" Little Sovereign replied, gritting his teeth, "The first tribulation has begun. As long as we survive it, the rest will be stable. I have countless divine swords. I have countless divine swords." Chapter 783. Isn't this too sudden? Shen Yinxing said, still in shock. Her body was still trembling slightly. The gale just now was really scary. If Zhou Xuanji hadn't caught them, what would have happened to them? Little Sovereign said. Otherwise, why would so many powerful cultivators die on this path? Zhou Xuanji adjusted the primordial energy in his body. He asked with a frown, "Even the inverse chaos divine ability can't block the wind of the first tribulation?" Shen Tang hugged Shen Yinxing tightly, fearing that her sister would be blown away. "This isn't an ordinary wind. If you didn't have the inverse chaos divine ability, you wouldn't be able to withstand it even if you had the cultivation of Origin Fusion Divine Lord," Little Sovereign replied. Little Sovereign replied and couldn't help but sigh. He was ashamed to say that he knew very little about the passage between the two worlds. Zhou Xuanji took a deep breath and said, "We can only be more careful." The two women nodded. They immediately urged the mortal chi in their bodies to form a mortal armor on the surface of their bodies to prevent the tribulation. After a while, the gale came again without any warning. This time, Zhou Xuanji grabbed the two women in time. They weren't blown away. Such a gale came 5 more times. After 5 times, the gale no longer appeared. However, Zhou Xuanji and the other two didn't dare to be careless. According to Little Sovereign, the wind tribulation was just the beginning. There was still fire tribulation, water tribulation, metal tribulation, wood tribulation, cloud tribulation, and so on. There might even be a tribulation that Little Sovereign couldn't even imagine. The passage between the two worlds didn't count time. Zhou Xuanji and the other two had experienced countless tribulations here. They were almost numb. Not to mention Shen Tang and Shen Yinxing. Even Zhou Xuanji looked exhausted. His eyes were hollow. They had already passed the first tribulation. Their cultivation had taken a huge leap. Zhou Xuanji's cultivation had reached 8 vast heavens. The two mortal gods had broken through to 1 vast heaven realm. But even so, they weren't happy. No matter how strong their cultivation was, they couldn't withstand such a boring and difficult torture. Little Sovereign appeared again. He couldn't help but smile bitterly when he saw the state and expressions of the 3. It won't be good if this continues. Little Sovereign thought with a frown. He couldn't help but look ahead. The passage between the two worlds was still surrounded by the boundless universe of stars. No matter how magnificent the scenery was, it would become boring. Little Sovereign's pupils suddenly shrank as he exclaimed, "Something's coming." With these words, Zhou Xuanji looked up abruptly, and his eyes turned cold. Shen Tang and Shen Yinxing also raised their heads. Black shadows appeared in front of them, attacking them like a swarm of locusts. There were so many of them that it was difficult to estimate their numbers. Zhou Xuanji immediately unleashed the primordial chaos sword shadow, and billions of sword shadows shot out from behind him. Boom! 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 Countless black shadows were destroyed one after another, as if the universe was exploding. Shen Tang and Shen Yinxing also made a move. Their palms struck out, and the mortal chi turned into countless arrows that followed. Now that things had come to this, they no longer panicked when they encountered such a scene, and they even felt that it was normal. Until now, there's still no hope of getting out? Zhou Xuanji asked in a deep voice. His heart was in a mess. He didn't know how much time had passed in the Kunlun Origin Court. The Sword Spirit had yet to remind him of his birthday. "I don't know either. The situation you encountered has already deviated from what I encountered in the past." Little Sovereign sighed, looking a little embarrassed. Zhou Xuanji's brow furrowed even tighter. Just as he was about to speak, a violent storm of ice and snow blew over from the front. Everything happened too fast. Zhou Xuanji and the other two had no time to dodge. Even the inverse chaos divine ability couldn't block this snowstorm. Boom! The three were instantly frozen into ice. An irresistible suction force came from the left and right, pulling Shun Tang and Shun Yinxing. Zhou Xuanji's eyes widened. He frantically mobilized the primordial energy in his body, but he couldn't break the ice. The two women looked desperate. They could only see the distance between them getting farther and farther. In less than 2 breaths of time, they had disappeared in different directions. Another suction force came, pulling Zhou Xuanji forward. How could this be? Zhou Xuanji's heart fell into a rage. He had persisted for so long. Was he going to fail like this? More importantly, even if he could survive, what about Shun Tang and Shun Yinxing? His promise had become ridiculous. Little Sovereign Soul was also frozen. He couldn't get into the Lesser Supreme Sword. He sent a voice transmission to Zhou Xuanji, crying, "We are dead. This is a space-time turbulence. I encountered it once and almost died. But the space-time turbulence at that time was far less powerful than it is now. It's over. It's over." Little Sovereign's reaction was even bigger than Zhou Xuanji's. It wasn't easy for him to have a chance to resurrect. Naturally, he didn't want to die. If he died this time, there would really be no hope of resurrection. Zhou Xuanji cast the Sword Fusion Technique and 9-Soul Fusion Technique, raising his strength to the peak. The ice on his body began to tremble. No matter how hard he struggled, he still couldn't break the ice. He immediately cast the Greatly Divine Suppressor Technique, splitting thousands of Greatly avatars and slashing at him. The sword chi bombarded from all directions, causing the layer of ice to shatter into pieces. But he still couldn't break the ice. This time, Zhou Xuanji was in complete despair. Little Sovereign was also in despair. He no longer spoke. They began to wait for death. At this moment, a red figure suddenly appeared in front of them. Looking at the figure, it was obviously a woman. For some reason, Zhou Xuanji felt inexplicably familiar when he saw her. It was as if he had seen her somewhere before. The red figure quickly arrived in front of him and slapped the ice with her palm. The ice immediately turned into mist and dissipated. Zhou Xuanji was finally saved. He heaved a sigh of relief and asked, "Thank you. Who are you?" The red figure touched his face before turning around and leaving. In the blink of an eye, she disappeared without a trace. What was that just now? How could she destroy the space-time turbulence with a single palm strike? Little Sovereign cried out in shock. His face was filled with disbelief. Zhou Xuanji shook his head and said, "You don't know, how would I know?" He subconsciously touched his face. Why did she touch my face? What is she trying to tell me? Who the hell is she? Zhou Xuanji furrowed his brow and fell into deep thought. Don't think about it. Get out of here quickly. Little Sovereign urged in an anxious tone. Zhou Xuanji looked back, trying to find the Shun Tang sisters. But he couldn't even capture their aura. Little Sovereign sighed and said, "Give up. You can't find them." In the end, the two mortal gods still died. If he had known this earlier, it would have been better for Zhou Xuanji to become stronger and leave this place alive. Zhou Xuanji furrowed his brow and asked, "What will happen to them?" Little Sovereign replied, "They will either die or be lost forever. If I knew this, I wouldn't have become the Sovereign." He had left the passage between the two worlds alive back then. Zhou Xuanji hesitated for a moment. In the end, he could only continue on his way. Although he felt guilty, he couldn't delay any longer. He had to rush back to protect his family. Chapter 784. After the disappearance of Shun Tang and Shun Yinxing, Zhou Xuanji's confidence was severely damaged. Along the way, he didn't say a word. Even if Little Sovereign comforted him, it was useless. Now, Zhou Xuanji could only charge ahead without thinking about anything else. As for Little Sovereign, he couldn't predict what he would encounter next. "This is troublesome. Looks like your aptitude is stronger than mine. Otherwise, how could you encounter such a monstrous space-time turbulence?" Little Sovereign sighed as he looked ahead with a dignified expression. The starry sky in front of him was still beautiful, but beneath this beauty was a boundless killing intent. Zhou Xuanji did not reply. His eyes were like torches as he looked ahead coldly. In the future, he would have to face the calamity alone. Without Shun Tang and Shun Yinxing, he felt lonely. In the past, the sisters would whisper to each other, which made him feel like someone was there. Little Sovereign often slept and couldn't accompany him most of the time. Wind tribulation, fire tribulation, snow tribulation, and so on, as well as the spatial turbulence, appeared one after another, tempering Zhou Xuanji's will. Relying on the inverse chaos divine ability, Zhou Xuanji forcefully endured it, and his cultivation was steadily improving. Not only that, but his physical body was also transforming. To him, all kinds of tribulations were just the process of tempering his body. Time had lost all meaning here. Zhou Xuanji felt that a long time had passed. It had been so long that he had almost forgotten everything that had happened. He had finally broken through to the 9 vast heavens. Above them was the Origin Fusion Divine Lord. He was not the slightest bit happy about the advancement of his cultivation. His consciousness was starting to blur. It was as if it would fall into an eternal slumber at any moment. Little Supreme Zun flew out of the sword and shouted, "Brat, steady yourself." Seeing Zhou Xuanji's heavy eyelids, his heart burned with anxiety, but there was nothing he could do. If it was him back then, he might not have been able to hold on until now. "I want to go back," Zhou Xuanji said with difficulty. His qi was thin and weak. He tried to keep his eyes open and stay awake. But endless drowsiness assaulted his heart. He had never been so tired before. A voice was persuading him in his heart. All he had to do was relax, and all of this would be over. He would no longer have to endure loneliness and torment. Damn it! An intense fury exploded out from the depths of Zhou Xuanji's heart. He raised his right hand, and thousands of legendary swords appeared out of thin air. All of the legendary swords fused together into the multi-dimensional slash sword. The multi-element slash sword burst forth with a bright light, illuminating the passage between the two worlds. This was his final strike. If it didn't work, then it would really be over. Zhou Xuanji forced his eyes open. A cold glint flickered in his purple eyes as the soul source orb emerged from his glabella, suppressing the universe. The passage between the two worlds froze. He used the Void Instant Kill technique to activate the Multiverse Slash. This sword slashed out, and it tore through space as it swept forward with an indomitable and unstoppable momentum. Zhou Xuanji felt the pressure lessen and sped up. Under the guidance of the multi-element slash sword, his speed was pushed to the limit. As he squandered the great power, his consciousness fell into a deep sleep. Endless darkness engulfed his soul. In the end, did I still fail? This was Zhou Xuanji's last thought. Zhou Xuanji had a dream. He dreamed that he was strolling in the peach blossom forest with Jiang Shui, Xian Xianghua, Shun Tang, Shen Yinxing, Chang Xian, and Huang Lianxin. Zhou Xiaoxian and Zhou Tanhua were playing not far away, while Xiao Jinghong, Zhao Songjian, and the others were practicing their swords in various places in the peach forest. The scene was harmonious, and the fragrance of flowers and the chirping of birds made Zhou Xuanji intoxicated. Shen Yinxing suddenly came up to him, curled her lips, and asked, "Why did you abandon me?" Zhou Xuanji was taken aback for a moment before he replied with a smile. "When did I abandon you? Weren't you following me?" Shen Yinxing's eyes instantly turned red. She hugged her arms, trembling with fear. "You abandoned me. You said you would take me and my sister there. You promised." Zhou Xuanji's heart skipped a beat when he heard this. His eyes widened. Just as he was about to speak, everything around him suddenly shattered. Waking up from the nightmare, he straightened his upper body and kept gasping for breath. Cold sweat broke out all over his body. He felt very cold. The cold air was coming from all directions. He looked forward and found that he was floating in the middle of an ice path. His eyes widened as he tried to remember. Thousands of swords floating around him flew toward him and merged into his body, making his consciousness more and more sober. I'm still alive. Did the previous sword strike succeed? He hurriedly summoned Little Sovereign and asked, "Where is this place?" Little Sovereign was in a daze. His eyes immediately widened when he saw the scene around him. "Absolute time. You're actually here," he cried out in surprise, as if he had seen something incredible. Zhou Xuanji furrowed his brow. He didn't know if this place was good or bad for him. He suddenly discovered that his purple sky stardust robe had exploded. There were only a few pieces of purple cloth left on his body, barely covering his body. His skin was covered in blue light, emitting a faint radiance. Zhou Xuanji looked at his body and muttered to himself in doubt. Little Sovereign also looked at him. His eyes widened even more as he sucked in a breath of cold air. "Oh my God, am I dreaming?" he mumbled to himself, his voice trembling. Zhou Xuanji looked at him and asked, "What do you know? Just say it. Why is this guy still hanging me at this time?" Little Sovereign took a deep breath, trying to calm down, and said, "Your body has already become the invading immortal physique. It's almost impossible to cultivate such a divine physique. Since ancient times, the invading immortal physique has only been a legend. I have only seen one person successfully cultivate it. He could travel through time and space at will. No one could catch him, including me. Later, he disappeared, and the invading immortal physique never appeared again. And this place is the absolute time. This is the end of time. There is no danger, but there are no benefits either because you can't break out. If you want to break out of the absolute time, you need to cultivate the invading immortal physique." Little Sovereign's voice came to an abrupt halt. He slapped himself and cursed. "Mother asterisk cur, I'm actually stupid. Didn't you cultivate the invading immortal physique? You can escape." He immediately became excited and said in a trembling voice, "Brat, as long as you break out of here, no one can compete with you for the position of sovereign. This is a supreme opportunity that most people will never encounter. The invading immortal physique can prevent the invasion of any rules. Only absolute power and magic power can suppress you. This point will be ignored by many people. The higher the cultivation, the more people like to use various great Tao rules and divine abilities." Zhou Xuanji raised his brow after hearing this. "Am I really that powerful? But why do I feel that there isn't much difference from before? It's just that my body has become lighter." He waved his hands and suddenly found that he could feel the existence of time and space. It was as if invisible things were squeezing around him. When he gently waved his hands, it was as if he was patting cotton. This feeling was extremely magical. Chapter 785. Invading Supreme Physique. Zhou Xuanji looked at his own body and mumbled to himself. His figure was not thin, nor was it exaggerated. His muscles were well-defined, and there was a sense of power and beauty. Streaks of blue light wrapped around his body, making him look extremely spirited, especially when coupled with his purple eyes and the soul source orb. He looked like an innate god. How strange. How did he manage to cultivate the invading venerable body? Little Sovereign sized up Zhou Xuanji, rubbing his chin in thought. His gaze fell on the soul source orb. The soul source orb was one of the treasures of the Kunlun origin court. It was extremely powerful and could even easily suppress the Holy Ghost. He then looked into Zhou Xuanji's eyes and thought to himself, could it be? He seemed to have thought of something, and his gaze became strange. What should I do next? Where should I go? Zhou Xuanji asked. In the absolute time realm, he could not see the direction of the Kunlun origin court. Previously, with the inverse chaos divine art, he could still see the miniature of the Kunlun origin court in front of him. But now, the vision that the inverse chaos divine art gave him seemed to have disappeared. Let's recover first. There's no rush. After all, time has stopped here. Little Sovereign waved his hand. Then, he began to scan the surroundings, looking for a direction to escape. Zhou Xuanji sat down and activated the Great Leap Divine Suppressor technique. Endless Tao energy flowed into his body from the Tianxia map and turned into great vital energy. Eh. Zhou Xuanji suddenly frowned. He discovered that the quality of his primordial energy had changed. He was much stronger than before, and it could even be described as a world of difference. The speed at which his Tao power turned into primordial power was almost instantaneous. This speed, at the same time, his physical strength was recovering at an extremely fast speed. He could clearly feel his own vitality. The corners of his mouth rose. Was this the power of the invading venerable body? Zhou Xuanji's fighting spirit was ignited in an instant. One who survived a great disaster was bound to be blessed with good fortune. With the invading venerable body, he would definitely return to the Kunlun origin court. About the time it took for an incense stick to burn had passed. Zhou Xuanji looked at Little Sovereign and said, "I have already recovered. What should I do?" Little Sovereign was stunned and asked, "So fast? Wasn't there no trace of primordial power just now?" Zhou Xuanji nodded and said, "I'm not sure either. It's just that fast and natural." Hearing this, Little Sovereign fell silent. He looked at Zhou Xuanji with an extremely strange gaze, as if he was looking at a monster. He took a deep breath, pointed to the left, and said, "Go in that direction and directly rush out. Can you feel the existence of time and space now?" Zhou Xuanji nodded. He raised his right hand and began charging the Lesser Supreme Sword. The blade trembled and glowed with a purple light. Great Enlightenment God Slash. In an instant, he channeled more than half of his primordial power into the sword. It wasn't just the conversion speed. Even the speed at which he could use his primordial power had reached the pinnacle. Zhou Xuanji had never felt so relaxed before. His control over his power and primordial energy had reached an unprecedented level. He slashed out with his sword. It seemed easy, but the sword chi contained endless power. There was a loud bang. The space in front of him shattered, and a black hole appeared. A wild gale blew past, and Zhou Xuanji flew in with his sword and disappeared. Kunlun Origin Court, pure sword heaven. On top of a tall mountain, everyone was gathered. Xian Xianghua, Jiang Shui, Chang Xiyin, Ing Zhuge, Rin Niming, and the others were standing on the edge of the cliff. Zhou Tanhua, Zhou Xiaoxian, Xiao Jinghong, Doya Old Man, Lin Changge, and the others were standing behind them. Behind them were the disciples of Emperor Sword Court, the demonic cultivators of the demon realm, and the servants of pure sword heaven. They all had a solemn look on their faces as they nervously looked ahead. There was a black ball on the horizon. It was growing bigger at a speed visible to the naked eye. Strands of black chi were revolving around it, flowing rapidly. A terrifying aura was suppressing pure sword heaven, making the atmosphere very depressing. "We can't just sit here and wait for death," Xian Xianghua said with a frown. The others all had different expressions. They were also thinking of countermeasures, but they didn't even know what that thing was. Daoya Old Man began calculating with his fingers, but was slapped away by Xian Daoya. "Don't calculate blindly." Xian Daoya glared at him and said in a bad mood. Ing Zhuge said, "It should be related to Zhou Fa. Everyone, be careful. The evil sky divine range has fallen. We can only rely on ourselves now." Hundreds of years had passed since Zhou Xuanji left. In the end, the evil sky divine range was no match for the other divine ranges and suffered countless casualties. Now, they were only struggling at death's door. Beast Sovereign was busy negotiating with the major divine ranges and the Origin Court. He had no time to take care of the evil sky divine range. "Let me do it," Zhou Tanhua, who still maintained his youthful appearance, said. He stepped forward and flew towards the black hole in the distance. Duanhua, Jiang Shui subconsciously wanted to stop him, but was stopped by Xian Xianghua. Xian Xianghua shook her head and said, "Let him try. He is no longer a child. Perhaps he can create a miracle like his father?" She was certainly distressed about her son, but at the critical moment, she let Zhou Tanhua do whatever he wanted. After so many years, Zhou Tanhua was no longer the same as before. Zhou Tanhua walked towards the black ball of light step by step. His eyes turned purple, and two beams of purple light shot out. Exterminating divine eyes. The violent, exterminating divine light collided with the black ball of light, causing the space within a radius of 1,000 meters to fluctuate. The black ball of light was squeezed so hard that it distorted and deformed, as if it would break at any moment. At this moment, the wisps of black energy wrapped around the black light ball and turned into black hands that grabbed towards Zhou Tanhua. Boom! Zhou Tanhua erupted with his own aura. Shockingly, it was sword chi that directly shattered these black hands. Sword chi soared into the sky. This was a sword technique that Zhou Xuanji had used a long time ago. He had already practiced it into a divine ability. He raised his right hand and was about to grab it. Suddenly, a figure appeared in front of him. It was Zhou Fa. Zhou Fa's palm landed on his chest, causing him to vomit blood and fly backwards. Zhou Fa's attack succeeded. An excited smile appeared on his face. I finally hurt this kid. His eyes turned pitch black as he raised his right hand high, condensing a black sword. He wanted to kill Zhou Tanhua with a single slash. How dare you? Ing Zhuge appeared behind Zhou Tanhua in a single step and caught him. At the same time, he slapped Zhou Fa with his left palm. Countless blue dragon shadows raged towards Zhou Fa, swallowing the sky and seizing the sun. They were unstoppable. Zhou Fa smiled contemptuously. His black desire divine eyes burst out with a terrifying suction force, directly absorbing all the blue dragon shadows. He closed his eyes and paused for a moment before he suddenly opened them. Roar! Countless black dragon shadows flew out of his eyes, rapidly growing bigger. They then charged towards Ing Zhuge and Zhou Tanhua with an even more violent aura. Seeing this, everyone on the cliff used their divine abilities to support the two and resist Zhou Fa's violent attack. What are you laughing at? An icy voice rang behind Zhou Fa. Zhou Fa's pupils shrank as he subconsciously looked back. He saw a red figure appear behind him. Its body was condensed from red chi. It was very enchanting, and its true face couldn't be seen. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.